Ralph Bailey's hand trembles as he reaches for the xenobiology classroom door. He's the last student to arrive, and as he steps inside, his heart sinks. The room is empty except for Professor Zira, the imposing hydrogen instructor looming at the front. Mr. Bailey. Zira's deep voice resonates through the room. You will stay late today for extra credit. Failure to comply means failing this course. Ralph swallows hard. His scholarship and his entire future at the interspecies university are hanging in the balance. It's 2157, and Earth's recent admission to the Galactic Federation has opened doors for human students like him. But those doors can slam shut just as quickly. The 22-year-old engineering major nods, his working-class background a constant reminder of how much he has to lose. Without his scholarship, tuition is impossibly a fact that weighs heavily as he takes a seat. Professor Zira's gray skin ripples with bioluminescent patterns, a physiological trait of the warrior race, still adjusting to peaceful coexistence. Her muscular frame towers over the desk as she activates the classroom's advanced holographic technology. The air shimmers, and suddenly they're no longer in a sterile classroom. The walls melt away, replaced by the harsh, alien landscape of the hydrogen homeworld. Ralph gasps, the immersive environment cutting them off from the rest of the campus. Today's lesson, Zira announces, her tone brooking no argument, involves hands-on study of hydrogen physiology. Ralph's nervousness spikes. He's heard rumors about hydrogen biology, especially their pheromones that can affect other species. The close quarters of the simulated environment suddenly feel claustrophobic. Zira moves closer, her presence filling Ralph's senses. The air grows thick, heavy with an alien scent he can't quite place. It's intoxicating and terrifying all at once. A loud click echoes through the simulated landscape. Zira's eyes narrow, and Ralph's widen in realization. They're locked in. It appears, Zira says, her voice low and intense, that we are isolated, Mr. Bailey. Ralph's pulse races. He's trapped in an alien world with a professor known for her strict methods and misunderstood attempts at human interaction. The stakes of this extra credit assignment have just skyrocketed. As Zira approaches, Ralph becomes acutely aware of the powerful hydrogen pheromones permeating the air. His mind races, caught between fear and an unexpected, growing fascination. This is more than just a test of his xenobiology knowledge. It's a crash course in interspecies relations, with consequences that could ripple through the delicate balance of human-alien coexistence on campus. Ralph takes a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever comes next. In this moment, he's not just a struggling student, he's an ambassador for humanity, facing the unknown in a locked classroom-turned-alien world. The extra credit assignment has begun, and there's no turning back. The air shimmered as the holographic technology activated, transforming the sterile classroom into a lush, alien jungle. Ralph blinked, adjusting to the sudden shift in environment. The humid air clung to his skin, heavy with unfamiliar scents that tickled his nostrils. Welcome to Hydrogen Prime. Professor Zira's voice cut through the ambient sounds of rustling leaves and distant creature calls. This immersive setting will provide a more authentic experience for our study. Ralph nodded, trying to calm his racing heart. The dense foliage surrounded them, creating an illusion of isolation that felt all too real. He watched as Zira moved through the simulated environment with practiced ease, her muscular frame navigating the terrain effortlessly. Suddenly, the jungle flickered. Trees wavered like mirages, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to shift. Ralph stumbled, catching himself on what he thought was a tree trunk, only to have his hand pass through it. "Professor," he called out, panic rising in his voice. Something's wrong with the simulation. Zira's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. It appears we have a malfunction. She strode to where the classroom door should have been, but found only more simulated jungle. We're locked in. As if on cue, the temperature began to rise. Ralph felt sweat beading on his forehead, his shirt sticking to his back. He glanced at Zira and noticed her bioluminescent patterns glowing more intensely, pulsing with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Your lights, he said, gesturing vaguely. They're brighter. Zira nodded, her expression tightening. A natural stress response in hydrogen physiology. The malfunctions are affecting more than just the visuals. Ralph swallowed hard, suddenly aware of a new scent in the air. It was sweet yet musky, unlike anything he'd encountered before. He felt a flush creep up his neck, his heart rate increasing for reasons he couldn't quite explain. "We need to find a way out," Zira said, her voice lower than usual. "The system controls are scattered throughout the simulation. We'll have to navigate through different environments to reset them manually." As they moved through the shifting landscape, Ralph found himself hyper-aware of Zira's presence. The heat and exertion had caused them both to shed outer layers, and he couldn't help but notice the powerful muscles rippling beneath her gray skin. They encountered their first obstacle in a simulated clearing. A holographic beast, resembling a cross between a bear and a lizard, materialized before them. Its form flickered and distorted, making its movements unpredictable. "Stay behind me," Zira commanded, dropping into a defensive stance. Ralph complied, but found himself admiring her poise and strength. As they worked together to outmaneuver the creature, he felt a growing sense of trust and something else he couldn't quite name. The beast dissipated as they reached the first control panel. Ralph's fingers flew over the unfamiliar alien technology, guided by Zira's instructions. As they worked in close proximity, he became increasingly aware of the effect her pheromones were having on him. His skin tingled where their arms brushed, and he found himself stealing glances at her powerful form. To his surprise, Ralph noticed Zira's bioluminescent patterns changing, pulsing in a way that seemed to mirror his own quickening pulse. Her eyes met his, and he saw a flicker of something that made his breath catch. The jungle dissolved around them, replaced by a barren, rocky landscape. The abrupt change sent them both stumbling, and Ralph found himself caught in Zira's strong arms. The contact sent a jolt through him, and he lingered a moment longer than necessary before stepping back. We should keep moving," he said, his voice husky. Zira nodded, her patterns flashing in a way that suggested she was equally affected. "Yes, we must locate the next control panel." As they navigated the treacherous terrain, Ralph found the line between student and teacher blurring. They relied on each other's strengths, with Ralph's problem-solving skills complementing Zira's physical prowess. The shared challenge brought them closer, both physically and emotionally. The environments continued to shift, each presenting new obstacles. A simulated ocean forced them to swim together, the close contact amplifying the effect of Zira's pheromones. An Arctic tundra had them huddling for warmth, breaking down the last barriers of personal space. Throughout it all, Ralph became increasingly aware of Zira, not just as his professor, but as a woman, albeit an alien one. He found himself admiring the grace of her movements, the intelligence in her eyes, the strength in her form. Finally, they reached what appeared to be the last control panel. The simulation flickered and stabilized, revealing a secluded grotto. Bioluminescent plants cast a soft glow over the scene, reminiscent of Zira's own patterns. A pool of crystal-clear water reflected the ethereal light. "This is—" Ralph trailed off, taking in the intimate setting. "A traditional hydrogen mating grotto," Zira finished, her voice low and intense. "The simulation appears to be drawing from our subconscious thoughts." Ralph's heart pounded as he turned to face her. The air was thick with pheromones, and the heat of their exertions had left them both breathless. Zira's bioluminescent patterns pulsed rapidly, matching the rhythm of his own racing pulse. "Professor," he started, then corrected himself. Zira, I'm not sure what's happening between us, but... Zira stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. To progress further, we may need to engage with the simulation scenario. Ralph swallowed hard, acutely aware of every point of near contact between them. The boundaries of their relationship were blurring, interspecies understanding taking on a whole new meaning. As they stood on the precipice of something new and unknown, the simulation hummed around them, waiting for their next move. The air in the grotto grew thick with tension as Ralph and Zira stood mere inches apart. Suddenly, the simulation flickered violently, and the serene environment began to shift. The grotto dissolved, replaced by a series of rapidly changing scenes, each more intimate than the last. Ralph stumbled as the ground beneath him transformed from soft moss to rough stone, then to something that felt like warm sand. Zira steadied him with a strong hand, her touch sending a jolt of electricity through his body. "The system is malfunctioning," Zira observed, her voice husky. "We're being thrust into different hydrogen courtship scenarios." As if on cue, they found themselves in a dimly lit cave adorned with bioluminescent crystals. Strange, rhythmic music filled the air, and Ralph felt an inexplicable urge to move to its beat. "This is the Cave of Resonance," Zira explained, her patterns pulsing in time with the music. Hydrogen couples perform a synchronized dance here to demonstrate their compatibility. Without thinking, Ralph stepped closer to Zira, his body responding to the primal rhythm. She mirrored his movements, and soon they were engaged in an intricate dance, their bodies moving in perfect harmony. As they twirled and swayed, the scene shifted again. This time, they were in a steaming hot spring, the warm water lapping at their waists. Ralph's clothes clung to his skin, and he couldn't help but notice how Zira's gray skin glistened with moisture. "The springs of purification," Zira breathed, her eyes locked on Ralph's. "Intended for ritual cleansing before more intimate activities." Ralph's heart raced as he realized the implications. The water seemed to amplify the effect of Zira's pheromones, making his head swim with unfamiliar sensations. Before he could fully process this new development, the simulation changed once more. They now stood in a circular arena, surrounded by holographic spectators. Alien weapons materialized in their hands. "A combat ritual," Zira explained, her muscles tensing. "We must demonstrate our strength and skill to each other." Ralph hefted the unfamiliar weapon, surprised to find it felt natural in his grip. As Zira lunged at him, he reacted instinctively, parrying her attack with unexpected grace. They engaged in a complex dance of strikes and counterstrikes, their movements becoming more fluid and synchronized with each passing moment. As they fought, Ralph felt a surge of confidence. He matched Zira move for move, his human agility complementing her hydrogen strength. The holographic crowd roared its approval, and Ralph saw a glimmer of admiration in Zira's eyes. The simulation continued to cycle through various scenarios, each one pushing the boundaries of their physical and emotional comfort. They found themselves performing intricate hand rituals that required them to intertwine their fingers in complex patterns. In another scene, they had to navigate a treacherous maze while bound together by a glowing energy tether. Throughout it all, Ralph discovered reserves of strength and adaptability he never knew he possessed. He tackled each challenge with growing confidence, impressing Zira with his quick learning and unwavering tenacity. As they progressed, Ralph began to notice subtle changes in Zira's bioluminescent patterns. The pulsing lights seemed to convey meaning beyond words, and to his surprise, he found himself instinctively understanding their messages. They developed a wordless communication, anticipating each other's moves and thoughts with increasing accuracy. Just as they completed a particularly challenging ritual involving a simulated hunt, the classroom's emergency systems activated. A blast of frigid air hit them, dispelling the humid heat that had built up during their trials. Ralph gasped as the cold bit into his skin, his thin, sweat-soaked clothes offering little protection. Without hesitation, Zira pulled him close, her powerful arms encircling him. He pressed against her, feeling the warmth radiating from her body. Hydrogen physiology is adapted to extreme temperatures, she explained, her breath warm against his ear. We must share body heat to prevent hypothermia. As they huddled together, the simulation stabilized, settling into a single unchanging scene. They found themselves in a circular chamber with smooth, metallic walls. In the center stood an altar-like structure, glowing with an otherworldly light. Zira's eyes widened in recognition. "This is the Chamber of Union," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's the site of our most sacred mating ritual." Ralph swallowed hard, acutely aware of Zira's body pressed against his. The pheromones that had been affecting him throughout their ordeal seemed to intensify, clouding his judgment. "The ritual," Zira continued, her patterns pulsing rapidly, "requires a deep physical connection, an exchange of fluids." Understanding dawned on Ralph. He looked up at Zira, seeing the conflict in her eyes that surely mirrored his own. The intimacy they had developed throughout their trials had transformed their relationship into something neither of them had anticipated. "If we complete this ritual," Ralph said, his voice shaky, "what does it mean for us? For human-hydrogen relations?" Zira's hand cupped his cheek, her touch surprisingly gentle. "It means crossing a line, Ralph. One we can uncross." As they stood on the precipice of this momentous decision, the chamber hummed with energy, awaiting their choice. The effects of the pheromones, the shared trials, and the urgent need to escape the malfunctioning simulation all pushed them towards a conclusion that would forever alter the course of their lives. Ralph's heart pounded as he looked into Zira's eyes, seeing a reflection of his own desire and uncertainty. The weight of their decision hung in the air between them, charged with potential and fraught with consequences neither could fully foresee. The air crackled with tension as they stood at the precipice of a decision that would forever alter their relationship. Suddenly, as if responding to their heightened emotions, the simulation lurched into action. The chamber around them pulsed with ethereal light, and holographic glyphs appeared, floating in the air. These symbols began to move, forming intricate patterns that seemed to guide their movements. Ralph felt his body responding instinctively to the holographic prompts. He reached out, his fingers intertwining with Zira's in a complex series of gestures. Their bodies moved in sync, following the ancient hydrogen mating dance with surprising grace. As they twirled and stepped in perfect harmony, the temperature in the room began to fluctuate wildly. One moment, Ralph was drenched in sweat, his thin clothes clinging to his skin. The next, he shivered uncontrollably as icy air blasted through the chamber. Zira pulled him closer during these cold spells, her powerful arms enveloping him. "Stay with me," she murmured, her breath warm against his ear. "Our combined body heat will protect us." The rapid temperature changes only intensified the effect of Zira's pheromones. Ralph's head swam with unfamiliar sensations, his nerve endings singing with each point of contact between them. He found himself hypersensitive to every nuance of Zira's movements, every subtle shift in her bioluminescent patterns. Just as the dance reached a fever pitch, the classroom's emergency systems activated with a shrill alarm. Sprinklers burst to life above them, dousing them in a fine mist. The sudden shower startled Ralph, breaking his concentration. "Decontamination spray," Zira explained, blinking rapidly as the liquid ran down her face. "It's meant to neutralize potentially harmful alien substances." But instead of clearing Ralph's head, the spray seemed to amplify the effect of the pheromones. He gasped as a wave of intense attraction washed over him, stronger than anything he'd experienced before. Judging by the rapid pulsing of Zira's bioluminescent patterns, she was equally affected. Their wet clothes clung to their bodies, leaving little to the imagination. Ralph's gaze traced the powerful curves of Zira's alien physique, his heart racing. Without conscious thought, he stepped closer, drawn by an irresistible force. Zira's hands found his waist, her touch electric even through the damp fabric. "Ralph," she breathed, her voice husky with desire. "We should stop, but I don't want to." He looked up into her eyes, seeing his own longing reflected there. "Neither do I," he admitted, his inhibitions lowering with each passing second. They resumed the mating ritual, their movements more fluid and sensual than before. The holographic guidance became unnecessary as they anticipated each other's actions, bodies moving in perfect synchronization. Just as they neared what felt like the culmination of the ritual, the simulation abruptly shifted. The intimate chamber dissolved, replaced by a stark, clinical environment. Holographic representations of hydrogen infants surrounded them, their alien features a stark reminder of the potential consequences of their actions. Ralph and Zira froze, the sudden change jolting them back to reality. They stood, breathing heavily, their arms still entwined. The weight of what they'd almost done settled over them like a heavy blanket. "This is—" Ralph started, struggling to find words. "A birthing chamber," Zira finished, her voice tight with conflicting emotions. "The simulation is showing us the potential outcome of our actions." Before either of them could say more, the classroom door hissed open. They turned, still locked in their embrace, to see Professor Zandor standing in the doorway. The Andorian's antennae twitched as he took in the scene before him, his expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "What in the name of the Galactic Council is going on here?" Zandor demanded, his piercing gaze moving from Ralph to Zira and back again. Ralph opened his mouth to explain, but found himself at a loss for words. How could he possibly describe the intense, transformative experience they had just shared? Zira, her composure returning, stepped forward. "Professor Zandor, there's been a malfunction in the simulation systems. We were trapped in a series of hydrogen mating scenarios, and the environmental controls have been fluctuating dangerously." Zandor's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. He moved to a control panel on the wall, his fingers flying over the interface. "Initiating emergency shutdown," he announced. The holographic environments flickered and vanished, leaving them standing in the center of the empty classroom. Ralph shivered as the air conditioning kicked in, chilling his damp skin. Zandor turned back to them, his expression grave. "I need to understand exactly what transpired here. The mixing of hydrogen pheromones with human physiology is uncharted territory, not to mention the ethical implications of a student and teacher engaging in." Whatever this was, Ralph and Zira exchanged glances, both acutely aware of the lingering effects of their experience. The pheromones still coursed through their systems, making it difficult to focus on Zandor's words. "Sir," Ralph began, his voice hoarse, "we didn't intend for any of this to happen. The simulation malfunction caught us off guard, and then the pheromones." Zandor held up a hand, cutting him off. "Save your explanations for now. We need to get you both to the medical bay immediately. We have no idea what prolonged exposure to these conditions might have done to your systems." As they followed Zandor out of the classroom, Ralph found himself hyper-aware of Zira's presence beside him. Their arms brushed as they walked, sending tingles up his spine. He caught her eye, seeing a mixture of confusion, desire, and apprehension that he knew mirrored his own feelings. The implications of what had almost happened between them loomed large in Ralph's mind. How would this affect their relationship moving forward? What would it mean for human-hydrogen relations on a broader scale? As they approached the medical bay, Ralph's heart raced with a combination of lingering arousal and growing anxiety. Whatever came next, he knew that his life, and his understanding of interspecies relationships, had been irrevocably changed. Changed The lingering effects of their shared experience in the holographic chamber clung to them like a second skin, invisible yet palpable. As they entered the medical bay, Ralph's senses were immediately overwhelmed. The sterile environment, with its sharp scent of disinfectant and low hum of advanced medical equipment, seemed to heighten his already heightened awareness. He could feel Zira's presence beside him, her warmth radiating even without direct contact. Dr. Lara Tvrin, a striking figure with Vulcan features and Andorian antennae, approached them with a mix of scientific curiosity and professional concern. "I am Dr. Tvrin," she introduced herself, her voice calm and measured. "Please, lie down on the examination tables." Ralph and Zira complied, their movements synchronized as if choreographed. As they settled onto adjacent tables, Ralph felt a jolt of electricity course through him when his arm accidentally brushed against Zira's. He saw her bioluminescent patterns flare in response, a mesmerizing dance of light that seemed to speak directly to something primal within him. Dr. Trin's fingers flew over the controls of a hovering diagnostic array. "Fascinating," she murmured, her eyes flicking between the readouts and her patients. "The pheromone levels in both subjects are off the charts. And there's something else, a compound I've never seen before." Professor Zandor leaned in, his antennae twitching with agitation. "Is it dangerous?" "Uncertain," Dr. Trin replied. "But it appears to be amplifying their sensory responses and creating a unique form of empathic link." As if to demonstrate her point, Ralph suddenly gasped, his back arching slightly off the table. At the exact same moment, Zira's patterns pulsed rapidly, her breath quickening to match his. "Remarkable," Dr. Trin said, adjusting her scanner. "Their neural patterns are synchronizing at an unprecedented rate." Ralph turned his head to look at Zira, finding her eyes already locked on him. The intensity of her gaze made his skin tingle, and he could swear he felt waves of emotion radiating from her, desire, confusion, concern, all mingling together in a heady cocktail that mirrored his own feelings. Dr. Trin administered a series of treatments, injecting them with compounds designed to neutralize the pheromones and stabilize their conditions. But as the minutes ticked by, it became clear that the treatments were having limited effect. "The compound in their systems is proving resistant to standard detoxification procedures," Dr. Trin reported, a note of frustration creeping into her usually composed voice. The doors to the medical bay hissed open, admitting a tall, imposing figure. Dean Voxloren, the Arcturian head of the university, strode in, his crystalline skin refracting the light in sharp angles. "I demand a full explanation," he announced, his multifaceted eyes sweeping the room. As Professor Zandor began to recount the events in the classroom, Ralph found his attention drifting. The sound of the dean's voice faded into background noise, replaced by an acute awareness of Zira. He could hear her heartbeat, feel the rhythm of her breathing as if it were his own. When he closed his eyes, he saw afterimages of her bioluminescent patterns dancing behind his eyelids. "This is unacceptable." Dean Voxloren's sharp voice cut through Ralph's haze. "The risks of such close interspecies contact—" "With all due respect, Dean," Dr. Trin interrupted, "we have a more immediate concern. Their condition is continuing to escalate." As if on cue, Ralph felt a surge of heat course through his body. He turned to see Zira's patterns creating complex, mesmerizing displays. Without conscious thought, his hand reached out towards her, drawn by an irresistible force. "Restrain them," Dean Voxloren ordered, but Dr. Trin held up a hand. "Wait," she said, her eyes narrowing as she studied her instruments. "I have a hypothesis. The most effective way to neutralize this compound might be to allow the mating process to complete naturally." A shocked silence fell over the room, broken only by the rapid beeping of the medical monitors tracking Ralph and Zira's increasingly unstable vital signs. "You can't be serious," Dean Voxloren sputtered. The ethical implications alone. We may not have a choice, Dr. Trin cut in, her voice urgent. The compound is triggering a cascading effect in their nervous systems. If we don't find a resolution soon, both could face severe neurological consequences. Ralph barely registered the debate raging around him. His world had narrowed to Zira. The pulsing of her patterns, the subtle shifts in her scent, the way her chest rose and fell with each breath. He felt as though he could read her thoughts, sense her emotions as clearly as his own. Suddenly, alarms blared from the monitoring equipment. Critical spike in neural activity, Dr. Trin announced, her fingers dancing over the controls. We need to make a decision now. Ralph's eyes locked with Zira's. In that moment, despite the chaos surrounding them, a wordless understanding passed between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. As the alarms continued to wail and the debate intensified, Ralph and Zira remained at the center of the storm, their fates hanging in the balance. The consequences of the next few moments would ripple far beyond the walls of the medical bay, challenging the very foundations of human-alien relations in ways no one could have anticipated, predicted. The alarms on Dr. Trin's monitoring equipment suddenly erupted into a cacophony of urgent beeps and shrill tones. Her antennae twitched rapidly as she interpreted the flood of data streaming across her screens. Critical neural disruption detected, she announced, her voice tight with tension. Both patients are entering a severe autonomic crisis. If we don't act immediately, they risk permanent neurological damage. Dean Voxloren's crystalline features shimmered with agitation. He glanced between the writhing forms of Ralph and Zira, then back to Dr. Trin's grave expression. After a moment of tense deliberation, he gave a sharp nod. "Proceed with your proposal, Doctor," he said, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the flashing emergency lights. "We have no other choice." Dr. Trin wasted no time. Her fingers flew across the control panels, initiating a complex series of protocols. "Initiating emergency quarantine and environmental adaptation," she declared. "We need to move them to the secure isolation chamber immediately." As the medical staff scrambled to prepare, Ralph felt as if his entire nervous system was on fire. Every cell in his body seemed to pulse in sync with Zira's bioluminescent patterns. He could sense her pain, her fear, and beneath it all, a primal urge that threatened to consume them both. "Zira," he gasped, reaching out to her. Their fingers intertwined, sending a visible shockwave of energy rippling up their arms. As they were carefully transferred to the isolation chamber, the door to the medical bay hissed open. A stern-faced human in an impeccably tailored suit strode in, his presence immediately commanding attention. "I'm Jonathan Blackwell, University Legal Counsel," he announced, his sharp gaze taking in the scene. "I was informed of the situation. Dean Voxloren, you can't seriously be considering this course of action. The legal implications alone." "Mr. Blackwell," Dr. Trin cut in, her voice brooking no argument, "I assure you, the legal ramifications of their deaths would be far more severe. We have no time for debate." As if to emphasize her point, Ralph let out a strangled cry. His back arched off the bed, muscles spasming uncontrollably. Zira's patterns flared in response, casting the room in a dazzling, otherworldly light. Blackwell opened his mouth to protest further, but was interrupted by another arrival. Ambassador Krex, the imposing Hydrogen representative to the Galactic Federation, ducked through the doorway, his predatory gaze immediately locking onto Ralph and Zira. "I demand to oversee this procedure," Krex growled, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the room. "If a Hydrogen mating ritual is to be performed, it must adhere to our sacred traditions." Dr. Trin's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Ambassador, Mr. Blackwell, I understand your concerns. But right now, my priority is saving these 2 lives. You may observe, but do not interfere." With that, she activated the isolation chamber's environmental controls. The temperature rose rapidly, and a fine mist began to fill the air, infused with stabilizing compounds designed to facilitate the mating process. Ralph felt the change immediately. The oppressive heat reminded him of the simulated hydrogen environment, awakening something primal within him. His muscles coiled with newfound strength, senses sharpening to an almost painful degree. Beside him, Zira's bioluminescent patterns created a hypnotic dance of light and shadow. Her scent filled his nostrils, intoxicating and irresistible. Without conscious thought, they began to move together, their bodies remembering the steps of the ritual they had begun in the holographic chamber. As they touched, a faint glow began to emanate from their skin. It spread rapidly, enveloping them in a cocoon of shimmering energy. The assembled onlookers watched in awe as human and hydrogen forms seemed to merge and separate, creating impossible shapes and patterns. The room's holographic system suddenly flickered to life, projecting swirling star fields and alien landscapes that pulsed in rhythm with Ralph and Zira's movements. Dr. Triness' eyes widened as she studied her instruments. "Incredible," she breathed. "The energy they're generating is interfacing with our systems. I've never seen anything like it." As the ritual reached its apex, Ralph felt a surge of sensation unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as if every nerve ending in his body was firing at once, connecting him not just to Zira, but to something vast and incomprehensible beyond. A massive wave of neural activity washed over them both. In that moment, Ralph could have sworn he saw glimpses of other worlds, other realities, flickering at the edges of his consciousness. Suddenly, the lights throughout the medical bay flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in as alarms blared across the campus. In the isolation chamber, Ralph and Zira collapsed, their bodies still entwined, glowing faintly in the dim red emergency lighting. Dr. Trin rushed to their side, her scanners already assessing their condition. "The compound has been neutralized," she reported, a note of relief in her voice. "But their physiological changes. It's beyond anything I could have predicted." As the medical team worked to stabilize Ralph and Zira, the observers stood in stunned silence. The full implications of what they had just witnessed were only beginning to sink in. Dean Voxloren was the first to speak. "Dr. Trin, Professor Zandor, Mr. Blackwell, Ambassador Krex, my office, immediately. We need to discuss our next steps before word of this spreads any further." As they filed out, leaving Ralph and Zira in the care of the medical staff, the air was thick with tension. Whatever had just transpired in that room, it was clear that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Ralph drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of Zira's presence beside him and the lingering echoes of their shared experience. As he finally succumbed to exhaustion, one thought floated through his mind. What would happen when they woke up? Ralph's consciousness drifted in a haze of alien sensations and fragmented memories. Time lost all meaning as he floated in a sea of pulsating light, his mind intertwined with Zira's in ways he couldn't begin to comprehend. Occasionally, he caught glimpses of the waking world, worried faces, urgent voices, the cold touch of medical instruments, but these moments slipped away like wisps of smoke. On the fourth day, Ralph's eyes snapped open. He gasped, lungs filling with air as if he'd just breached the surface after a deep dive. The sterile white ceiling of the medical bay came into focus, along with the concerned face of Dr. Trin hovering above him. "Welcome back, Mr. Chin," she said, her antennae twitching as she ran a scanner over his body. "How do you feel?" Ralph opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. His body felt different, stronger, more alive. He flexed his fingers, watching in fascination as faint, phosphorescent patterns flickered beneath his skin. "I feel strange," he managed, his voice hoarse from disuse. Dr. Triness' expression tightened. "She's still unconscious. Her condition is stable, but we haven't been able to wake her." Ralph turned his head, eyes searching the room until they landed on Zira's still form in the adjacent bed. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed weakly, a far cry from the vibrant display he remembered. As Ralph struggled to sit up, Dr. Trin placed a hand on his shoulder. "Careful. Your body has undergone significant changes. We need to run some tests before." The door to the medical bay hissed open, revealing Dean Voxloren. The Arcturian's crystalline form seemed more angular than usual, refracting the harsh medical lighting in sharp, agitated patterns. "Dr. Trin, report," he demanded, striding into the room. As the doctor began detailing Ralph's condition, the human tuned them out, focusing instead on the new sensations coursing through his body. He could feel every heartbeat, every breath, with startling clarity. And there was something else, a faint, persistent tug at the edge of his consciousness, pulling him towards Zira. Ralph's introspection was interrupted by a commotion outside the medical bay. Raised voices and the sound of running feet echoed through the corridors. Dean Voxloren's multifaceted eyes narrowed. "What now?" he muttered, moving to the door. A harried-looking Zabrorian student skidded to a halt in the doorway, his tentacles writhing with agitation. "Dean Voxloren, there's a situation in the quad. Students are gathering. They're demanding answers about what happened to the human and the hydrogen." The dean's crystalline form shimmered with hardly restrained frustration. "Contain the situation. I'll address them shortly." He turned back to Ralph and Dr. Trin. "This cannot leave this room. Do you understand?" Before either could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway, the imposing form of Ambassador Krex. The hydrogen's predatory gaze fixed on Ralph, who felt a primal shiver run down his spine. "I must speak with the human," Krex growled. "Alone." Dean Voxloren began to protest, but the ambassador cut him off with a sharp gesture. "This is a matter of hydrogen prophecy. Your academic concerns are irrelevant." Reluctantly, the dean and Dr. Trin withdrew, leaving Ralph alone with the towering hydrogen. Krex approached the bed, his eyes never leaving Ralph's face. "Do you understand what you have become?" the ambassador asked, his voice a low rumble. Ralph shook his head, still struggling to process the changes in his own body. Krex leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "For generations, our people have spoken of a being who would bridge the gap between hydrogen and alien, a catalyst for our evolution." His eyes glinted in the harsh light. "That being is you." The weight of the ambassador's words settled over Ralph like a physical force. He opened his mouth to respond, but a sudden spike of pain lanced through his head. Gasping, he clutched at his temples. In that moment, he felt it, a connection, a presence in his mind that wasn't his own. "Zira, she's waking up," Ralph said, his voice tight with urgency. "I can feel it." Krex's eyes widened, and he turned to the door. "Dr. Trin," he bellowed, "get in here now." The medical bay erupted into a flurry of activity as Dr. Trin and her team rushed to Zira's bedside. Monitors beeped urgently as they worked to stabilize her condition. "Her neural patterns are fluctuating wildly," Dr. Trin reported, her fingers dancing over the control panel. "We need to—" "Let me help," Ralph interrupted, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "I can reach her." Dr. Trin hesitated, glancing at Krex and Dean Voxloren, who had returned amid the commotion. After a tense moment, the dean nodded. Ralph approached Zira's bed, guided by an instinct he couldn't explain. As he reached out to take her hand, his newly acquired bioluminescent patterns began to glow with increasing intensity. The moment their fingers touched, a brilliant light engulfed them both. Ralph felt a jolt of energy surge through his body, and suddenly, he was somewhere else entirely. He found himself in a vast, starlit void, face to face with Zira. Her form shimmered with ethereal light, her patterns creating complex, mesmerizing displays. Ralph, her voice echoed in his mind. What's happening to us? Before he could respond, a flood of memories and sensations washed over him. Zira's memories, her thoughts and feelings intertwining with his own. He saw glimpses of her childhood on the Hyrogen homeworld, felt the weight of her people's expectations, experienced her fear and exhilaration upon arriving at the university. In turn, he felt her presence in his own mind, exploring his memories, his hopes and dreams, his growing feelings for her. "We're connected," Ralph said, his voice resonating through this mental landscape. Somehow, the ritual, it changed us. Zira's form flickered, her patterns pulsing with a mix of emotions Ralph could now read as clearly as his own. "We need to go back," she said. "There's so much we need to understand." Ralph nodded, and together, they focused on the distant sensation of their physical bodies. The starlit void began to fade, replaced by the harsh reality of the medical bay. As Ralph's vision cleared, he found himself still holding Zira's hand. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his with a gaze of profound understanding. "Ralph," she said, her voice a mixture of Hyrogen clicks and English words. "We made it." The medical team erupted into action, swarming around Zira's bed to check her vital signs. Ralph stepped back, his knees going weak from the experience they had shared. As Dr. Trin began questioning Zira about her condition, Ralph became aware of the tense atmosphere in the room. Dean Vox Lauren and Ambassador Kreck stood off to one side, engaged in a heated whispered discussion. Through the open door, he could hear the distant sound of chanting, student protesters demanding answers. Ralph's gaze returned to Zira, who was now sitting up in bed, her bioluminescent patterns glowing with renewed vigor. Their eyes met, and he felt a spark of the connection they had shared in that mental realm. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever consequences their transformation might bring, Ralph knew one thing with absolute certainty. He and Zira were in this together, their fates now inexorably intertwined. Their shared experience had fundamentally altered them both, creating a bond that transcended mere physical proximity. As Zira's eyes focused on Ralph, she spoke, her voice a melodic blend of Hyrogen clicks and English words. "The stars! I can still see them when I close my eyes." Ralph nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The memory of their mental journey lingered, a tapestry of shared consciousness that had forever changed them. Dr. Trin's antennae twitched with excitement as she observed their interaction. "Fascinating," she murmured, her fingers flying over her data pad. "Zira, can you describe your current physical state?" As Zira began to respond, mixing Hyrogen and English effortlessly, the room erupted into a flurry of activity. Xenolinguists who had been observing from a distance rushed forward, their recording devices at the ready. "This is unprecedented," one of them exclaimed, his multifaceted eyes wide with wonder. "A true human Hyrogen pigeon developing in real time." Dr. Trin held up a hand, silencing the excited chatter. "We need to conduct a full series of scans immediately," she ordered, her voice firm. "Prepare the quantum resonance imager." As the medical team sprang into action, Dean Vox Lauren and Ambassador Kreck stepped closer to Ralph's bed. The dean's crystalline form shimmered with hardly restrained agitation. "Mr. Chun," he began, his voice low and urgent, "I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. What's happened here goes far beyond the scope of our xenobiology program. The implications—" Ambassador Krex cut him off with a growl. "The implications are clear, Dean. The prophecy is fulfilled. These two are the bridge between our peoples." Before the dean could respond, Dr. Trin's voice rang out. "Dean Vox Lauren, Ambassador, I need you to step back. We're ready to begin the scans." Ralph and Zira were carefully moved into the quantum resonance imager, a massive device that hummed with hardly restrained energy. As the scan commenced, Ralph felt a strange, tingling sensation throughout his body. He reached out instinctively, his hand finding Zira's. The moment they touched, their bioluminescent patterns flared to life, pulsing in perfect synchronization. Dr. Trine's eyes widened as she studied the readouts. "Incredible," she breathed. "There's a new organ. Here, near the brainstem. It's present in both of them." The room fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. After a moment, Dean Vox-Lauren spoke, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Doctor, are you saying that Mr. Chun and Zira have evolved?" Dr. Trin nodded slowly. "It appears so. This organ seems to be the source of their bioluminescent communication and enhanced abilities. I believe we're looking at a new subspecies." She paused, her antennae quivering with excitement. "I propose we classify it as Homo hydrogen symbioticus." The announcement sent shockwaves through the room. Whispers erupted among the assembled scientists and observers, a mix of excitement and apprehension in their voices. Ralph, still holding Zira's hand, felt a surge of emotion that wasn't entirely his own. Through their connection, he sensed her mix of wonder and fear, mirroring his own conflicted feelings. "What happens now?" Ralph asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, the door to the medical bay slid open with a hiss. A stern-faced Vulcan woman strode in, flanked by a team of officials bearing the insignia of the Galactic Federation. "I am T'Prel," she announced, her gaze sweeping the room before settling on Ralph and Zira. "I lead the Federation's investigative team. We require full access to all medical data and permission to interview the subjects immediately." Dean Vox-Lauren stepped forward, his crystalline form refracting light in sharp, agitated patterns. "Now wait just a moment. This is a delicate situation." T'Prel cut him off with a raised hand. "The Federation's jurisdiction in matters of interspecies hybridization is clear, Dean Vox-Lauren. We must assess the potential risks and implications without delay." As the Dean and T'Prel began a heated discussion, Ralph became aware of a commotion outside the medical bay. The sounds of chanting and raised voices filtered through the walls, growing louder by the moment. Ambassador Krex moved to the window, his massive form casting a shadow across the room. "The Hydrogen elders have arrived," he growled. "And it seems they are not alone." Ralph struggled to sit up, his enhanced senses overwhelmed by the cacophony of sights, sounds, and emotions flooding through him. Through his link with Zira, he felt her rising anxiety, mirroring the tension that now gripped the entire campus. As Dr. Trin and her team worked to stabilize their condition and continue their tests, Ralph and Zira exchanged a look of silent understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their fates now inexorably linked by forces beyond their comprehension. The medical bay doors slid open once again, revealing the imposing figure of Captain Aria Martinez, her face set in a grim expression. "Dean Vox-Lauren," she said, her voice tight with urgency, "we have a situation developing outside. The Purity Front has begun protesting at the main gates, and tensions are rising rapidly." The Dean's crystalline form shimmered with frustration. "Captain, implement full lockdown procedures immediately. No one enters or leaves the campus without my express permission." As Captain Martinez nodded and turned to leave, Ambassador Krex stepped forward. "I insist on bringing in a contingent of Hydrogen guards to protect Ralph and Zira," he growled. "Their safety is paramount." The captain's eyes narrowed. "With all due respect, Ambassador, my team is more than capable of handling security. Additional Hydrogen presence might only escalate the situation." As the argument between Krex and Martinez intensified, Ralph felt a sudden surge of energy course through his body. He gasped, squeezing Zira's hand tighter. Their bioluminescent patterns flared brightly, creating complex, mesmerizing displays that rippled across their skin. Dr. Trin rushed to their side, her instruments scanning rapidly. Their neural patterns are synchronizing at an unprecedented rate, she reported, her voice a mix of awe and concern. It's as if their minds are. Before she could finish, Ralph's consciousness expanded, merging with Zira's in a rush of shared sensations and memories. In that moment, they were one being, their perception stretching beyond the confines of the medical bay. Suddenly, Ralph's attention was drawn to a strange device in the corner of the room. It was clearly of hydrogen origin, its alien contours pulsing with a faint, rhythmic energy. Without consciously deciding to do so, Ralph reached out mentally, his newfound abilities allowing him to interface with the technology on an instinctive level. The device hummed to life, emitting a pulsating signal that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of space-time. Ralph Zira's shared consciousness followed the signal as it stretched out beyond the Earth's atmosphere, reaching towards the stars. As quickly as it had begun, the mental merging subsided. Ralph found himself back in his own body, gasping for breath. Zira, too, looked shaken, her bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically. What just happened? Ralph managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Dr. Trin's antennae were practically vibrating with excitement. You activated some kind of hydrogen technology, she said, gesturing to the now glowing device in the corner. It's emitting a signal unlike anything I've ever seen. Ambassador Krex pushed past the others, his eyes fixed on the pulsing device. By the ancient hunters, he breathed, his voice a mix of awe and trepidation. The beacon of ascension. It was here all along. Before anyone could question him further, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Captain Martinez's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. Security alert. Unknown energy signature detected in orbit. All personnel, prepare for potential first contact scenario. The medical bay erupted into chaos as everyone tried to process this new development. Ralph and Zira exchanged a look of shared understanding and apprehension. Whatever they had set in motion, it was clear that their journey was a long way to go. Ralph's words hung in the air unfinished, as a sudden surge of energy coursed through his body. He gasped, his grip on Zira's hand tightening. Their bioluminescent patterns flared to life, creating an intricate dance of light across their skin. Dr. Trin rushed forward, her instruments whirring. Their neural patterns are synchronizing at an unprecedented rate, she reported, her voice a mix of awe and concern. In that moment, Ralph's consciousness expanded, merging with Zira's in a rush of shared sensations. Their combined awareness stretched beyond the confines of the medical bay, drawn to a strange device in the corner of the room. Without conscious thought, Ralph reached out mentally, interfacing with the alien technology. The device hummed to life, emitting a pulsating signal that seemed to resonate with the fabric of space-time itself. As quickly as it began, the mental merging subsided. Ralph found himself back in his own body, gasping for breath. Zira looked equally shaken, her patterns flickering erratically. What just happened? Ralph managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Before Dr. Trin could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Captain Martinez's voice crackled over the intercom, tense and urgent. Security alert. Unknown energy signature detected in orbit. All personnel, prepare for potential first contact scenario. The medical bay erupted into chaos. Ralph and Zira exchanged a look of shared apprehension, acutely aware that they had set something momentous in motion. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Emergency generators kicked in, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. The energy surge from the device must have overloaded the power grid, Dr. Trin said, her antennae twitching nervously. Dean Voxloren's crystalline form shimmered with agitation. We need to evacuate immediately, Captain Martinez, initiate lockdown procedures. His words were cut short as the bay's communication panel crackled to life. A deep, gravelly voice filled the room, speaking in a mix of hydrogen clicks and guttural growls. Ambassador Kvex's eyes widened in recognition. "It's High Admiral Krovac," he breathed. "The most feared hydrogen warrior in the galaxy." The voice continued, now in accented English. "This is High Admiral Krovac of the hydrogen warship Apex Predator. We detected an ancient distress signal from your location. Surrender the hybrid individuals immediately or face the consequences." The room fell silent, the implications of the Admiral's words sinking in. Ralph felt a chill run down his spine, realizing that he and Zero were now at the center of an interstellar incident. Dean Voxloren stepped forward, his voice steady despite the tension. "Admiral Krovac, this is Dean Voxloren of Galactic University. We're dealing with a sensitive situation here. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss." "There is nothing to discuss," Krovac interrupted. "The hybrids activated the beacon of ascension. They must be brought aboard our ship for examination. Refusal is not an option." As if to emphasize his point, the entire building shook, dust raining down from the ceiling. "The hydrogen ship is entering low orbit," Captain Martinez reported, her voice tight. "Earth's defense systems are activating, and... wait, we're picking up multiple new signatures. A Galactic Federation fleet just dropped out of hyperspace." Ralph's enhanced senses picked up a flurry of activity outside the medical bay. The sound of running footsteps and panicked voices filled the corridors as students and faculty rushed to evacuate. Amidst the chaos, Ralph became aware of a new sensation. His body felt different, stronger somehow. He flexed his hand, watching in amazement as his muscles responded with incredible speed and precision. Zira caught his eye, her expression mirroring his own wonder. "Ralph," she said, her voice a melodic blend of hydrogen and English, "I think we're still changing." Dr. Triness' instruments beeped urgently. "She's right," the doctor confirmed. "The energy from the hydrogen device is accelerating their evolution. Their physiology is adapting at an alarming rate." As if to demonstrate, Ralph reached out and effortlessly crushed the metal railing of his bed. He stared at his hand in shock, then at the mangled metal. A commotion outside the medical bay drew their attention. The sound of breaking glass and angry shouts filled the air. "Purity Front extremists," Captain Martinez growled. "They're using the blackout to infiltrate the campus. We need to move Ralph and Zira to a secure location immediately." Ambassador Krex stepped forward, his massive form blocking the doorway. "No," he said firmly. "They must stay here. I must perform the ritual of communion." Without waiting for a response, Kvex began a series of complex movements, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing in hypnotic rhythms. He emitted low, resonant tones that seemed to vibrate through Ralph's very bones. As Kvex's ritual reached its peak, Ralph felt his consciousness expanding once again. This time, however, he remained aware of his surroundings. Vivid images flashed through his mind. An ancient hydrogen artifact, hidden somewhere on Earth. A looming threat, an ancient enemy awakened by their signal. The vision faded, leaving Ralph with a sense of urgency. He locked eyes with Zira, knowing she had seen the same things. "We have to go," Ralph said, his voice filled with newfound dedication. "Now!" In one fluid motion, Ralph leapt from the bed, pulling Zira with him. Their enhanced strength and speed caught everyone off guard. Before anyone could react, they were through the door and into the darkened hallway. As they raced through the chaos of the evacuating campus, Ralph's mind raced. They needed to find the artifact, to understand what they had become. But with hydrogen warships above, the Galactic Federation closing in and Purity Front extremists hunting them, their journey was just beginning. Behind them, in the medical bay, The hydrogen device pulsed with renewed energy, its signals stretching out into the stars, calling to forces beyond their comprehension. Ralph and Zero burst through the medical bay doors, their enhanced bodies moving with fluid grace. The darkened hallway stretched before them, emergency lights casting an eerie red glow. Their bioluminescent patterns pulse and sync, providing a faint blue illumination that guided their path. "This way," Ralph whispered, his newly heightened senses picking up the sounds of chaos erupting throughout the campus. They moved swiftly, their footsteps barely audible as they navigated the maze-like corridors. The shared vision from Quex's ritual burned in their minds, driving them forward with urgent purpose. As they rounded a corner, they encountered a group of panicked students. Ralph instinctively pulled Zira into an alcove, their bodies pressed close as the group passed by. The proximity intensified their mental connection, and for a moment, their thoughts merged once again. "The ancient artifact storage facility," Zira said, her voice a melodic blend of languages. "That's where we need to go." Ralph nodded, understanding without words. They set off again, their movements perfectly coordinated, as if they were two parts of a single organism. Behind them, the sounds of conflict grew louder. The distinctive crack of breaking glass echoed through the building, followed by angry shouts and the heavy thud of boots on tile. "Purity front," Ralph growled, his enhanced hearing picking up fragments of hate-filled rhetoric. They quickened their pace, using their newfound abilities to navigate the chaos. Ralph's strength allowed him to easily move obstacles from their path, while Zira's heightened senses warned them of approaching danger. As they neared the center of the campus, a loud, crackling noise filled the air. The few functioning screens in the hallway flickered to life, displaying the face of a man with piercing eyes and a cruel smile. "This is Marcus Thorne of the Purity Front," the man announced, his voice dripping with contempt. "The alien menace has gone too far. They've created abominations, hybrid monstrosities that threaten the very essence of humanity. We demand an immediate end to this unholy experiment and the surrender of the alien scum responsible." Ralph and Zira exchanged a glance, their bioluminescent patterns flaring with shared indignation. They pressed on, more determined than ever to reach their destination. Suddenly, the ground beneath their feet trembled. A series of low-frequency pulses washed over them, disrupting the few functioning electronic devices in the vicinity. "The hydrogen ship," Zira said, her alien heritage allowing her to recognize the technology. "They're trying to isolate the campus." As if in response to the hydrogen attack, new alarms blared across the campus. The voice of Captain Aria Martinez crackled over the emergency system, distorted but determined. "All security personnel, deploy non-lethal countermeasures. Protect the students and faculty at all costs. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Ralph and Zira pressed on, their enhanced senses allowing them to avoid the growing pockets of conflict. They ducked into empty classrooms and utilized maintenance tunnels, steadily making their way towards the artifact storage facility. As they approached their destination, they encountered an unexpected obstacle. The facility's entrance was guarded by a shimmering field of energy, beyond which stood a series of translucent figures. "Holographic guardians," Zira breathed, her eyes widening in recognition. The security system must have activated its emergency protocols. Ralph studied the holograms, noting how they interacted with the environment. "They may not be solid, but they can still hurt us," he warned. Working in tandem, they began to navigate the holographic defenses. Ralph used his strength to create distractions, hurling debris at the Guardians to disrupt their patrol patterns. Zira, drawing on her understanding of alien technology, identified weak points in the projections. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed in complex sequences, allowing them to communicate without words. They moved with fluid grace, their bodies in perfect synchronization as they wove through the maze of holographic sentries. As they progressed deeper into the facility, Ralph and Zira's mutations continued to accelerate. Ralph winced as a ripple of change passed through his body, his skin taking on a subtle, scale-like texture. Zira blinked rapidly, her vision shifting to encompass new spectrums of light. "We need to hurry," Ralph said, his voice strained. "I don't know how much longer we can control these changes." They pushed forward, their hybrid senses overwhelmed by the cacophony of alien energies emanating from the vast collection of artifacts. Each relic seemed to call out to them, creating a dizzying array of sensations. Outside the facility, the sounds of conflict grew louder. They could hear the distinctive whine of Captain Martinez's non-lethal weapons clashing with the angry shouts of the Purity Front extremists. "There!" Zira exclaimed, pointing to a pedestal at the far end of the chamber. Resting upon it was a sphere-like device covered in intricate, glowing patterns. As they approached, the artifact pulsed with energy, resonating with their hybrid physiology. Ralph reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it neared the surface of the sphere. The moment his fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through both him and Zira. Their mutation stabilized, and a flood of information poured into their minds. Visions of an ancient conflict flashed before their eyes. They saw the Hydrogen, locked in a desperate battle against a parasitic species known as the Vexcar. The images shifted, showing the Vexcar entering a state of hibernation, scattered across the galaxy. With a jolt, Ralph and Zira realized the terrible truth. The signal they had inadvertently sent was awakening these ancient enemies. As the vision faded, they became aware of the chaos erupting outside the facility. The clash between the Purity Front, Captain Martinez's forces, and the newly arrived Hydrogen elders had reached a fever pitch. Ralph gripped the artifact tightly, his eyes meeting Zira's. "We have to warn them," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "All of them. The Vexcar are the real threat." Zira nodded, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with willpower. "Together," she said, taking Ralph's free hand in hers. With the Hydrogen artifact secure and their abilities stabilized, Ralph and Zira turned towards the exit. They could hear the sounds of battle drawing closer, the fate of multiple species now resting in their hands. As they prepared to step back into the fray, Ralph and Zira shared a moment of silent understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. Their hybrid nature no longer a curse, but a unique advantage in the face of an ancient and awakening threat. As they prepared to step back into the fray, Ralph and Zira shared a moment of silent understanding. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. Their hybrid nature no longer a curse, but a unique advantage in the face of an ancient and awakening enemy. With a determined nod, they pushed open the doors of the artifact storage facility and stepped into chaos. The scene that greeted them was one of utter pandemonium. The once quiet campus had transformed into a battleground. Purity Front extremists, their faces contorted with rage, clashed with Captain Martinez's security forces. Non-lethal weapons discharged with sharp cracks, their energy bolts illuminating the night sky in bursts of blue and white. Ralph's enhanced hearing picked up Marcus Thorne's voice, barking orders to his followers. "Push forward. We must purge this alien filth from our world." Zira's newly stabilized senses allowed her to process the mayhem with startling clarity. She tugged on Ralph's arm, guiding him through the melee. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed in sync, creating a subtle glow that drew curious glances from both sides of the conflict. As they navigated to the battlefield, Ralph's enhanced strength came into play. A toppled vending machine blocked their path. With a grunt, he lifted it effortlessly and tossed it aside, clearing the way for Zira and himself. "There!" Zira pointed towards the center of the campus. "The communication hub. We need to warn everyone about the Vexcar." They sprinted forward, their movements fluid and synchronized. Ralph's muscular frame acted as a shield, deflecting debris and protecting Zira as they ran. Zira's heightened senses allowed her to anticipate incoming dangers, calling out warnings that Ralph instantly acted upon. "Ralph! Zira!" A familiar voice called out. They turned to see Professor Zandor struggling to reach them, his path blocked by a group of Purity Front members. Before they could react, a low, resonant chant filled the air. Ambassador Krex and the Hydrogen Elders had begun a ritual, their bodies glowing with intense bioluminescent patterns. The display caught the attention of the combatants, momentarily pausing the battle. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ralph and Zira pressed on towards the communication hub. As they neared their destination, a Purity Front member activated an experimental weapon. A wave of electromagnetic energy pulsed outward, disabling all electronic devices in the vicinity. The sudden silence was jarring. Energy weapons fizzled out. Communication devices went dead, and even the ambient hum of the campus's power grid fell silent. In the confusion that followed, Ralph and Zira made their move. They approached the communication hub, finding it heavily guarded by a mix of university security and Purity Front extremists. Ralph's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. "We need a distraction," he whispered to Zira. Zira nodded, her gaze falling on a nearby statue. "That could work. I can bypass the building's security if you can clear a path." With a nod, Ralph moved into action. He gripped the base of the statue, his muscles rippling with newfound strength. With a mighty heave, he toppled the monument, sending it crashing to the ground. The guards scattered, shouting in alarm. In that moment of chaos, Zira darted forward. Her fingers danced over the security panel, her understanding of alien technology allowing her to quickly override the system. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, they encountered Dr. Elena Rossi, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination at their altered appearance. What are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We're here to help," Ralph said, his voice steady and reassuring. "There's a greater threat coming, and we need to warn everyone." As Ralph explained the situation, Zira began interfacing with the communication systems. She placed a hydrogen artifact on a nearby console, using it to boost the signal's strength far beyond its normal capabilities. Outside, the effects of the electromagnetic pulse began to wear off. The sounds of renewed fighting filtered through the walls of the hub. Captain Martinez's voice could be heard rallying her forces to defend the building. "We don't have much time," Dr. Rossi said, her initial wariness replaced by perseverance. "What do you need me to do?" Ralph began composing a message, drawing on the knowledge imparted by the hydrogen artifact. His words flowed in a language that would be understood by both humans and hydrogen, explaining the Vexcar threat and the need for unity. As they prepared to broadcast, a new sound filled the air, the deep, resonant hum of a massive ship entering the atmosphere. Through the windows, they could see Admiral Krovak's warship descending, its hull glowing red-hot from atmospheric entry. "Now or never," Zira said, her hand poised over the broadcast controls. Ralph nodded, took a deep breath, and began to speak. His voice, altered by his hybrid physiology, carried a weight and authority that seemed to transcend species. The message spread not just across Earth, but into the depths of space, carrying with it data from the hydrogen artifact that validated their warning. As the broadcast concluded, the sound of fighting outside the hub intensified. The door shuddered under the impact of multiple bodies trying to force their way in. Ralph and Zira moved to protect Dr. Rossi and the vital communication equipment. Their bodies began to glow, bioluminescent patterns pulsing in unison as they prepared for whatever might come through that door. With a final, thunderous crash, the door burst open. A figure stood silhouetted against the chaos outside, their identity obscured by the stark contrast of light and shadow. Ralph and Zira tensed, ready for either a new ally or another threat in their increasingly complex situation. The figure took a step forward, revealing the stern features of Dean Voxloren. His Arcturian physiology, usually so composed, showed signs of strain as he surveyed the scene before him. "Dr. Rossi, Mr. Eisen, Ms. Zira," he addressed them, his voice carrying a mix of authority and urgency. "Your broadcast has reached far beyond our expectations. We have a developing situation that requires immediate action." Ralph and Zira exchanged glances, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in a rapid exchange of information. Dr. Rossi stepped forward, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. "Dean Voxloren, what's happening out there?" she asked, gesturing towards the sounds of conflict outside. The Arcturian administrator's eyes narrowed as he responded. "Your message about the Vexcar threat has sparked a galactic response. Numerous alien civilizations have intercepted the broadcast, triggering unprecedented diplomatic and military mobilization." A distant rumble shook the building, causing loose equipment to rattle. Dean Voxloren's expression grew grave. "Admiral Krovak's warship has entered the atmosphere. Earth's automated defense systems are preparing to engage. We must evacuate immediately." As if to emphasize his point, a series of explosions lit up the night sky, visible through the hub's windows. Ralph's enhanced vision could make out the massive shape of the hydrogen vessel descending through layers of clouds, energy weapons from orbital platforms glancing off its hull. "Move now," Dean Voxloren ordered, ushering them towards the exit. As they reached the door, Ralph's newly heightened senses detected a familiar scent. He grabbed Zira's arm, pulling her back just as a group of Purity Front extremists burst into view, led by Marcus Thorne. "There they are!" Thorne shouted, his face contorted with fanatical rage. "The abominations must be purified." Ralph stepped forward, placing himself between the extremist and his companions. His muscles rippled beneath his scale-like skin as he prepared for confrontation. Zira's eyes darted from one threat to another, her expanded visual spectrum allowing her to track the movement of each attacker. "We don't have time for this," Dean Voxloren growled, revealing a side of himself few had ever witnessed. With practiced precision, he disarmed the nearest extremist, using the man's own momentum to throw him into his companions. Ralph seized the opportunity, his enhanced strength allowing him to push through the disoriented group. He cleared a path, knocking aside those who tried to impede their progress. Zira moved in perfect sync with him, her precognitive senses enabling her to guide the group through the chaos. As they burst out of the building, the full scale of the conflict became apparent. The campus grounds had become a battleground, with Captain Martinez's security forces engaged in a heated exchange with both Purity Front members and confused Hydrogen elders. A deafening roar filled the air as Admiral Krovak's warship descended further. Earth's orbital defenses unleashed a barrage of energy weapons, creating a dazzling and terrifying light show in the sky. The Hydrogen vessel effortlessly deflected the attacks, but the resulting energy discharges sent shockwaves across the campus. "Take cover," Dean Voxloren shouted as debris from damaged satellites began to rain down around them. They dove behind an overturned transport vehicle, narrowly avoiding a chunk of smoldering metal that crashed into the ground where they had been standing moments before. Suddenly, the hydrogen artifact in Zira's possession began to pulse with increasing intensity. Ralph felt a surge of energy coursing through his body, his bioluminescent patterns blazing in response. The artifact's emission spread outward, creating a shimmering field that enveloped the immediate area. The effect was instantaneous. The targeting systems of both the hydrogen warship and Earth's defenses faltered, their energy weapons sputtering and dying. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the preceding chaos. Dean Voxloren's eyes widened in realization. "This is our chance," he said, his voice filled with grit. He activated his communication device, which had been unaffected by the artifact's interference. "This is Dean Voxlorn of the Galactic University. I am ordering an immediate ceasefire on all fronts. Captain Martinez, stand down your forces. Ambassador Kvex, rein in the Hydrogen Elders. We need to convene an emergency summit to address the Vexcar threat." As the fighting gradually subsided, Ralph and Zira became aware of new sensations coursing through their bodies. Their skin took on a more pronounced iridescent quality, shimmering with colors beyond the normal human spectrum. They found themselves communicating without words, complex ideas flowing between them through subtle variations in their bioluminescent patterns. Professor Xandor, his clothes torn and his face smudged with dirt, finally reached their position. His eyes lit up with scientific fascination as he observed Ralph and Zira's transformation. "Extraordinary," he breathed, pulling out a handheld scanner. "Your hybrid physiology is continuing to evolve. This could be the key to developing countermeasures against the Vexcar." As the professor began his preliminary scans, Dean Voxlorn continued his efforts to organize the emergency summit. He designated Ralph and Zira as Earth's official representatives, recognizing the unique position their hybrid nature placed them in. The tense calm was shattered by a sudden, powerful energy pulse from the hydrogen artifact. The pulse radiated outward, far beyond the confines of the campus. In the distance, long dormant structures began to light up, their alien architectures revealing themselves as Vexcar outposts. "They're awakening," Zira said, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and dread. "The Vexcar outposts are activating all across the solar system." Ralph nodded, his enhanced senses picking up faint alien transmissions. "They're sending signals into deep space. The Vexcar fleet. It's coming." Dean Voxlorn's face set in unshakable focus. "Then we have no time to waste. Mr. Eisen, Ms. Zira, you'll need to prepare yourselves. As our representatives, you will be at the center of these negotiations. The fate of Earth and countless other worlds may rest on your ability to unite us against this common threat." As the first rays of dawn began to break over the horizon, Ralph and Zira stood amidst the wreckage of the campus, the weight of their newfound responsibilities settling upon them. The hydrogen artifact pulsed in Zira's hands, a tangible reminder of the ancient enemy they now faced. Around them, humans and aliens alike began to gather, tentative alliances forming in the face of impending doom. The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, and Ralph and Zira found themselves at its very heart. The battle for Earth's future was about to begin, and Ralph and Zira found themselves at its very center as they stepped into the hastily constructed neutral zone on the outskirts of the university campus. The air thrummed with tension as representatives from Earth, the Hydrogen, and the Galactic Federation filed into the makeshift summit chamber, their security forces maintaining a wary watch over the proceedings. Ralph's enhanced senses picked up the subtle shifts in body language and sent as Admiral Krovac entered the room. The Hydrogen leader cut an imposing figure in his battle armor, his warriors flanking him like living shadows. Human delegates visibly stiffened, but Ralph and Zira's presence seemed to act as a buffer, their hybrid nature bridging the gap between the two species. As the summit commenced, Ralph and Zira found themselves thrust into the role of translators. Their newly developed bioluminescent patterns pulsed and shimmered, conveying complex ideas between humans and hydrogen with startling efficiency. Captain Martinez, now representing Earth's military interests, leaned in close to Ralph. "How are you doing this?" she whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Ralph's skin rippled with iridescent hues as he responded. "It's like thinking in colors. The meaning just flows between us." The summit's focus quickly shifted to the looming Vexcar threat. Professor Xandor, his lab coat still smudged with dirt from the earlier chaos, stepped forward to present his findings. He gestured to Ralph and Zira, his voice carrying a note of excitement despite the grave circumstances. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored guests," he began, activating a holographic display. "What we see here in our hybrid friends may be our best hope against the Vex car. Their unique genetic makeup could be the key to developing effective countermeasures." The professor's words sparked an immediate uproar. Earth's scientific community saw potential, while military leaders viewed Ralph and Zira as possible weapons. The Hydrogen delegates growled their approval of anything that might give them an edge in battle. Amidst the clamor, Dean Voxloren's voice cut through, clear and authoritative. "While the potential is clear, we must not lose sight of the ethical implications. Mr. Eisen and Ms. Zira are not mere test subjects." As the debate raged on, Zira felt a sudden warmth from the hydrogen artifact she still carried. Without warning, it activated, projecting a detailed holographic map of the solar system. Gasps echoed through the chamber as the map revealed dozens of dormant Vexcar outposts, some alarmingly close to populated areas on Earth and other planets. Admiral Krovak's eyes narrowed as he studied the map. "This changes everything," he rumbled, his translator struggling to convey the full gravity of his tone. "We must act now." Seizing the moment, Dean Voxloren stepped into the center of the room. "I propose we form an interspecies task force to address this threat," he announced, his gaze sweeping the assembled leaders. "And I suggest that Ralph and Zira, with their unique abilities in connection to the artifact, should lead this effort." The proposal met with a cacophony of voices, some in support, others in vehement opposition. But before a consensus could be reached, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The vibrations grew stronger, items toppling from tables as the shaking intensified. "What's happening?" Dr. Rossi called out, steadying herself against a nearby console. Her question was answered moments later as emergency alerts flooded in. A massive Vexcar scout ship had emerged from beneath the ocean floor near the coastline, its imposing silhouette visible even from their distant vantage point. Panic rippled through the assembly, the immediate threat overshadowing all previous disagreements. Admiral Krovak strode forward, his powerful frame dominating the room. "I offer the full might of my warship in Earth's defense," he declared, his words causing a ripple of surprise among the human delegates. As Earth's military leaders cautiously accepted the offer, Ralph and Zira exchanged a look, their bioluminescent patterns conveying a shared realization. Ralph stepped forward, his voice steady despite the gravity of his words. "We have a plan," he announced, drawing all eyes to him. "Zira and I believe we can infiltrate the Vexcar scout ship. Our hybrid physiology might allow us to interface with their technology, potentially disabling the vessel from within." The room erupted into a mix of shocked exclamations and hurried discussions. Captain Martinez was the first to voice her concerns. "It's too risky. We can't send you in there blind." But as the Vexcar ship loomed ever closer, the lack of viable alternatives became painfully apparent. With reluctance etched on many faces, the plan was approved. What followed was a whirlwind of preparation. Ralph and Zira found themselves thrust into intensive training, their days blurring into a non-stop barrage of tactical instruction from human special forces and hydrogen hunters alike. Their bodies continued to evolve, bioluminescent patterns now allowing them to camouflage themselves by mimicking various environments. As they trained, Professor Zandor made a startling discovery. The hydrogen artifact projected a series of complex bioengineering schematics, potential upgrades for Ralph and Zira's hybrid bodies. The professor, his eyes alight with scientific curiosity, began to study these schematics with fervor, the ethics committee grudgingly granting approval due to the dire circumstances. Unbeknownst to the bustling task force, Marcus Thorne and a small group of Purity Front extremists watched from the shadows. They had escaped during the earlier chaos and now plotted to sabotage the mission, their fanatical ideology blinding them to the greater threat. As the day of the mission dawned, Ralph and Zira stood at the edge of the campus, their bodies humming with newfound power and untested abilities. The Vexcar scout ship hung in the sky like a dark promise, its alien contours a stark reminder of the challenge that lay ahead. With a shared nod, they stepped forward, ready to face the unknown and fight for the future of not just Earth, but countless worlds beyond. As Ralph and Zira stepped forward to face the unknown, they found themselves quickly swept up in a whirlwind of activity. The campus buzzed with a newfound sense of purpose as preparations for their mission to infiltrate the Vexcar scout ship intensified. Professor Zandor approached them, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and concern. "We're ready to begin the enhancement procedures," he said, gesturing towards a secure laboratory that had been hastily set up within the university grounds. The bioengineering upgrades revealed by the hydrogen artifact. They're unlike anything I've ever seen. Ralph and Zira exchanged a glance, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in sync. Without a word, they followed the professor into the lab. Inside, a team of human and hydrogen medical experts stood ready, their faces a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The procedure was grueling. Ralph felt as if every cell in his body was being rewritten, his nerves on fire as the upgrades took hold. Beside him, Zira's skin rippled with waves of iridescent color, her body adapting to the changes with surprising ease. Hours passed in a haze of pain and transformation. When it was over, Ralph stood up, marveling at the newfound strength coursing through his body. He flexed his hand, watching as his skin shifted to match the color and texture of the nearby medical equipment. Zira moved beside him, her movements fluid and graceful, almost predatory in their precision. "Extraordinary," Professor Zandor breathed, running a scanner over their bodies. "Your physical capabilities have been enhanced beyond our initial projections. Strength, speed, durability, all significantly increased." Ralph focused, feeling a strange tingling sensation across his skin. Suddenly, a localized electromagnetic field sprang to life around his hand, causing nearby monitors to flicker. Zira's eyes widened as she replicated the feat, her own field interfering with a different set of equipment. "That's not all," Zira said, her voice filled with wonder. She closed her eyes, concentrating, and her entire body seemed to fade from view, blending seamlessly with the laboratory backdrop. As Ralph and Zira explored their new abilities, alarms blared across the campus. They rushed outside to see Admiral Krovak's warship engaged in a series of daring maneuvers against the Vexcar scout ship. Energy weapons flashed across the sky as the hydrogen vessel darted in and out of range, gathering crucial intelligence on the alien ship's defenses. Dean Voxlorn approached, his face grim. "We're evacuating the coastal areas," he informed them. "The university is being converted into a command center. Every hand is needed." Over the next few days, Ralph and Zira pushed themselves to the limit in intensive training simulations. Human special forces and hydrogen hunters worked together to create scenarios that tested the full range of their new abilities. Ralph found himself scaling sheer walls with ease, his chameleon-like skin allowing him to vanish against any surface. Zira demonstrated an uncanny ability to disrupt electronic systems with precisely controlled electromagnetic pulses. As they trained, they became aware of periodic power outages and communication disruptions across the campus. Security teams scrambled to investigate, but the source remained elusive. The night before the mission, Ralph and Zira stood atop one of the university buildings, looking out at the ominous silhouette of the Vexcar scout ship on the horizon. Without warning, their bioluminescent patterns began to pulse in perfect synchronization. Ralph gasped as he felt his mind merge with Zira's, memories and instincts from both their human and hydrogen heritage flooding through them. When the connection faded, they looked at each other with new understanding. No words were needed. Their bond had deepened beyond the need for verbal communication. Dawn broke on the day of the mission, and the Vex-Car ship began to move towards the coast. Ralph and Zira boarded a sleek submersible, a marvel of human and hydrogen engineering. As they descended beneath the waves, Ralph felt a strange resonance between his bioluminescent patterns and the energy emissions from the alien vessel. The submersible glided silently through the water, evading the Vex-Car's outer defenses with ease. As they approached the massive hull of the alien ship, Ralph and Zira prepared to exit the vehicle. Their newly enhanced physiology allowed them to move through the water with incredible speed and efficiency. As they neared the hull, they activated their chameleon-like skin adaptations, becoming nearly invisible against the backdrop of the alien vessel. Ralph generated a subtle electromagnetic field, masking their approach from the ship's sensors. Finally, they reached the hull, coming face to face with an entrance mechanism unlike anything they had ever seen. It pulsed with an otherworldly energy, seemingly alive and aware. Ralph and Zira exchanged a glance, then placed their hands on the alien surface. Immediately, they felt a surge of energy course through their bodies. Their hybrid physiology reacted to the Vex-Car technology in ways they couldn't have anticipated. The entrance began to shift and reconfigure, responding to their touch. As an opening began to form in the hull, Ralph and Zira steeled themselves for what lay ahead, knowing that the fate of Earth and countless other worlds now rested on their shoulders. As the opening widened, they exchanged a final glance, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in perfect synchronization. Without a word, they slipped inside. The moment their bodies made contact with the alien surface, an unexpected surge of energy coursed through them. Their hybrid physiology reacted instantly, their bioluminescent patterns flaring brightly and resonating with the ship's energy emissions. The hull around them seemed to come alive, shifting and reconfiguring in response to their presence. A biomechanical airlock formed around them, sealing them off from the ocean. Ralph and Zira found themselves enveloped in a thick, gelatinous substance that filled the chamber. For a moment, panic threatened to overtake them, but their enhanced bodies quickly adapted. The gel allowed them to breathe, adjusting their systems to the ship's internal atmosphere. As the inner airlock door opened, they stepped into a vast, organic-looking corridor. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that mirrored their own, creating an eerie sense of connection between their hybrid bodies and the Vex-Car technology. Ralph ran his hand along the wall, marveling at how his skin developed a slight sheen, mimicking the interior surfaces of the vessel. "This is unexpected," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Zira nodded, her eyes scanning their surroundings. "We need to move quickly. Who knows how long before we're detected?" They began to navigate through the ship, their chameleon-like skin adapting to the ever-changing surfaces around them. The corridor branched off into a network of tunnels that seemed to pulse with life, as if they were part of the ship's circulatory system. Using their enhanced strength and agility, Ralph and Zira climbed through these tunnels, encountering various alien life forms that appeared to be symbiotically integrated with the vessel. These entities, resembling a cross between organic tissue and machinery, reacted to their presence with a mix of curiosity and alarm. As they progressed deeper into the ship, the tunnels opened up into a massive central chamber. Ralph gasped as he took in the sight before them. Hundreds of suspended animation pods lined the walls, each containing a Vex-Car in various stages of awakening. "It's a hibernation center," Zira whispered, her eyes wide with realization. "They're reviving their forces." Suddenly, their presence triggered a ship-wide alert. The bioluminescent patterns that had been pulsing softly around them shifted to a harsh, pulsing red. The change was accompanied by a low, reverberating sound that seemed to emanate from the very structure of the ship. Within moments, they heard the sound of approaching threats. Vex-Car drones, insectoid in appearance with multiple limbs and advanced biomechanical augmentations, began to converge on their location. "We need to split up," Ralph said urgently. Cover more ground, increase our chances of success. Zira nodded, her skin already shifting to blend with the background. I'll head for the command center, try to disrupt their communications. You find a way to disable their propulsion. As they separated, both experienced a sudden surge of evolutionary adaptation. Ralph felt his muscles densify, granting him even greater strength. Zira's mind seemed to expand, her ability to process information increasing exponentially. Ralph made his way towards what he hoped was a propulsion system, using his enhanced speed and electromagnetic abilities to disable pursuing drones. He found himself in a massive chamber filled with pulsating energy cores. Without hesitation, he began to systematically overload them, using his electromagnetic fields to disrupt their containment. The ship shuddered violently as the first core destabilized. Alarms blared, and Ralph could hear the sounds of approaching Vex-Car forces. Meanwhile, Zira had infiltrated the command center. Her enhanced cognitive abilities allowed her to interface directly with the Vex-Car control systems. She initiated a cascade failure in their communication array, temporarily cutting off the scout ship from the rest of the Vex-Car fleet. However, this action drew the attention of the ship's commander. Zira turned to find herself face-to-face with a towering Vex-Car warrior, its body a terrifying fusion of organic matter and advanced technology. As alarms echoed throughout the vessel, both Ralph and Zira found themselves cornered by advancing Vex-Car forces. Their bioluminescent patterns flared intensely, resonating with the ship's systems in unexpected ways. This resonance began to affect the Vex-Car technology, causing malfunctions and disruptions that bought them precious time. Outside the ship, the combined human and hydrogen forces detected the internal disturbances. Admiral Krovak's voice boomed over the communication channels. Now is our chance. Concentrate all fire on the scout ship's weakened defenses. Earth's military joined the assault, creating a massive diversion that prevented the Vex-Car from fully focusing on the internal threat posed by Ralph and Zira. Inside the ship, Ralph and Zira, though separated, felt their unique bond stronger than ever. They could sense each other's presence, their shared drive fueling their actions. As they prepared to face the full might of the Vex-Car forces within the ship, they knew that their actions had created a window of opportunity for the external assault. Ralph braced himself as a group of Vex-Car drones burst into the propulsion chamber, their biomechanical limbs poised to attack. Zira, in the command center, locked eyes with the Vex-Car commander, her mind racing to find a way to overcome this formidable opponent. The fate of Earth hung in the balance as the battle intensified, both inside and outside the Vex-Car scout ship. Ralph and Zira, the products of an improbable union between human and hydrogen, stood as the last line of defense against an ancient enemy bent on galactic domination. Their hybrid nature, once a source of uncertainty, now proved to be their greatest strength as they faced a challenge that would determine the future of not just Earth, but countless worlds beyond. The fate of Earth hung in the balance as the battle intensified, both inside and outside the Vex-Car scout ship. Ralph and Zira, the products of an improbable union between human and hydrogen, stood as the last line of defense against an ancient enemy bent on galactic domination. Their hybrid nature, once a source of uncertainty, now proved to be their greatest strength as they faced a challenge that would determine the future of not just Earth, but countless worlds. As Ralph braced himself against the onslaught of Vex-Car drones in the propulsion chamber, he felt a strange sensation ripple across his skin. The constant barrage of attacks triggered a sudden evolutionary response in his hybrid physiology. His skin began to harden, forming a protective exoskeleton that deflected the energy blast from the drones. Ralph marveled at his new armor-like covering, running a hand over the tough, yet flexible surface. "Well, that's handy," he muttered, refocusing on the task at hand. With renewed vigor, he pressed forward, tearing through bulkheads and creating makeshift barricades to slow the advancing drones. The ship shuddered violently as another energy core overloaded. Ralph's electromagnetic abilities allowed him to systematically disrupt the containment fields, causing cascading failures throughout the propulsion system. Alarms blared, their pitch rising to a deafening screech as the ship's systems began to fail. Meanwhile, in the command center, Zira found herself face-to-face with the imposing Vex-Car commander. The alien towered over her, its body a terrifying fusion of organic matter and advanced technology. As the commander launched a series of biomechanical tendrils towards her, Zira felt her mind accelerate. Time seemed to slow as her neural enhancements kicked into overdrive. She processed the incoming attack with unprecedented speed, her body moving almost instinctively to evade the deadly appendages. As she ducked and weaved, Zira's awareness expanded, allowing her to perceive the ship's data streams as tangible, manipulable entities. Without fully understanding how, Zira reached out with her mind, grasping the threads of information that controlled the ship's internal defense systems. With a thought, she redirected the security protocols, turning them against her attacker. The Vex-Car commander, caught off guard by this unexpected maneuver, found itself trapped within a shimmering containment field. It thrashed against the energy barrier, its eyes burning with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "I am Zexthor," the commander snarled, its voice a grating metallic sound. "You cannot hope to comprehend the power you face, hybrid." Zira's mind raced, processing and analyzing the ship's systems at an astounding rate. "I don't need to comprehend it," she replied, her fingers dancing across the alien control interface. "I just need to beat it." Outside the scout ship, the combined forces of Admiral Krovac and Earth's military pressed their advantage. Energy weapons and missiles pounded against the weakening defenses of the Vex-Car vessel. The hull began to buckle under the assault, breaches opening up to the vacuum of space. Inside, Ralph and Zira felt the sudden shifts in the ship's internal atmosphere. Their hybrid bodies adapted quickly, adjusting to the rapid changes in pressure and oxygen levels. Ralph, having successfully destabilized the propulsion system, began to make his way back towards Zira's position. As he navigated through the twisting corridors, Ralph encountered a group of Vex-Car warriors emerging from their hibernation pods. Their eyes, still glazed from long sleep, focused on him with predatory intensity. Ralph's exoskeleton gleamed in the pulsing red emergency lights as he raised his hands, calling upon his electromagnetic abilities. With a surge of energy, Ralph short-circuited the remaining active pods, halting the revival process for the majority of the Vex-Car forces. The awakened warriors charged towards him, their biomechanical limbs whirring with deadly intent. Ralph's enhanced strength allowed him to meet their assault head-on. He grappled with the first attacker, using its momentum to hurl it into its comrades. His hardened skin deflected their energy weapons, allowing him to close the distance and engage in hand-to-hand combat. As Ralph fought his way through the Vex-Car warriors, Zira continued her battle of wits with the ship's AI. Her accelerated neural processes allowed her to delve deep into the Vex-Car's hive-mind communication system. She discovered a critical weakness in their neural network and seized the opportunity. With surgical precision, Zira initiated a feedback loop in the system, causing confusion and disorientation among the active Vex-Car drones throughout the ship. The effect was immediate and devastating. Drones stumbled and collided with each other, their coordinated attacks dissolving into chaos. As Ralph and Zira's actions threw the ship into disarray, they felt a new connection forming between them. Their bioluminescent patterns pulsed in perfect synchronization, despite the vast distance separating them within the vessel. Suddenly, they could sense each other's thoughts and intentions as clearly as if they were standing side by side. This unexpected development allowed them to coordinate their efforts with unprecedented efficiency. Through their shared consciousness, they formulated a plan to completely disable the Vex-Car vessel. The central core, Ralph's thoughts echoed in Zira's mind. If we combine our abilities there, we might be able to trigger a complete shutdown, Zira finished, her excitement palpable even through their telepathic link. Guided by their shared awareness, Ralph and Zira began to converge on the ship's central core. They moved with purpose, their enhanced bodies pushing through the deteriorating vessel with ease. The ship's structure groaned and buckled around them as the external assault intensified. As they approached the central core chamber, Ralph and Zira felt their connection to each other and to the ship itself intensifying. The Vexcar technology, sensing the impending threat, began to adapt to their presence. Tendrils of biomechanical matter reached out, attempting to assimilate their hybrid physiology. Ralph's exoskeleton hardened further, resisting the invasive technology. Zira's mind expanded, racing to stay ahead of the ship's adaptive algorithms. They pushed forward, knowing that time was running out. Finally, they reached the entrance to the central core chamber. The massive door before them pulsated with energy, a fusion of organic and mechanical components that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. As Ralph and Zira prepared to breach this final barrier, they became aware of a massive energy buildup within. The ship shuddered violently, and through their connection to the Vexcar systems, they realized the terrible truth. The scout ship was preparing for a last-ditch effort, either to escape or to self-destruct, taking a significant portion of Earth with it. Ralph and Zira exchanged a glance, their bioluminescent patterns flaring with drive. The fate of Earth now hung on their ability to overcome this final obstacle and neutralize the Vexcar threat once and for all. With the combined forces of humanity and the Hydrogen bearing down on the failing scout ship, they stepped forward to face their greatest challenge yet. With a shared nod of grit, Ralph and Zira approached the pulsating door to the central core chamber. The massive barrier before them seemed alive, its organic components writhing and intertwining with mechanical parts in a grotesque dance. Ralph placed his hands on the door, feeling the strange texture beneath his hardened exoskeleton. He gritted his teeth and began to pull, his enhanced muscles straining against the alien material. Slowly, the organic fibers began to stretch and tear under his relentless assault. As Ralph created small gaps in the structure, Zira's eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. She reached out with her mind, delving into the complex circuitry of the door's mechanisms. Her consciousness raced through the alien systems, identifying weak points and exploiting them with surgical precision. The door groaned and shuddered, caught between Ralph's physical strength and Zira's mental assault. With a final, ear-splitting screech, it tore open, revealing the awe-inspiring sight within. The central core loomed before them, a colossal biomechanical construct that pulsed with energy. Its surface was a shifting maze of organic tissue and metallic components, radiating an eerie, otherworldly glow. Surrounding the core were dozens of Vexcar elites, their bodies more heavily augmented than any they had encountered before. At the center of the group stood a figure that exuded authority and menace in equal measure. High Commander Vexlorith, his body a seamless fusion of flesh and machine, fixed them with a gaze that burned with cold intelligence. Abominations! Vexlorith's voice resonated through the chamber, a sound like grinding metal. You dare to challenge the might of the Vexcar? Before Ralph or Zira could respond, the air around them shimmered. Swarms of nanobots materialized, their tiny forms glinting in the pulsing light of the core. They surged forward, a silver tide intent on overwhelming the hybrid pair. Instinctively, Ralph and Zira's bioluminescent patterns flared to life. The intensity of their glow increased exponentially, creating an electromagnetic field that repelled the advancing swarm. The nanobots scattered, momentarily confused by the unexpected resistance. Taking advantage of the brief respite, Ralph charged forward, his exoskeleton gleaming as he engaged the Vexcar elites in close combat. His fists, now harder than steel, crashed into the biomechanical bodies of his opponents. The sound of cracking metal and alien shrieks filled the air as he fought his way towards the core. Zira, meanwhile, focused her enhanced neural capabilities on the core's control systems. Her mind raced through layers of alien code, each more complex than the last. As she delved deeper, she made a startling discovery that sent a shock through her system. "Ralph!" she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos of battle. "The core, it's not just controlling the ship. It's maintaining the collective consciousness of the entire Vexcar species." Ralph grunted in acknowledgement as he grappled with a particularly resilient Vexcar warrior. "Can you disrupt it?" Zira's fingers danced across an invisible interface, her mind working at speeds that would have been impossible for a normal human. "I think so, but it's risky. We could potentially neutralize the Vexcar threat across the galaxy, but—" Her words were cut short as the ship shuddered violently. The external assault had finally breached the main hull, causing rapid decompression in multiple sections of the vessel. The sudden change in pressure sent everyone in the chamber reeling. High Commander Vex Lorth, his eyes glowing with malevolent purpose, strode towards the core. "Your efforts are futile," he snarled. "The Vexcar cannot be defeated by mere aberrations like you." With those words, Vex Lorth began to merge his consciousness with the ship's core. His body seemed to liquefy, flowing into the pulsating structure. The energy output of the core skyrocketed, and the ship's engines roared to life. Ralph and Zira exchanged a glance, their bioluminescent patterns synchronizing perfectly. They knew what they had to do. Moving in perfect unison, they approached the core. As they drew closer, their bodies began to change. Their skin became translucent, revealing intricate patterns of energy flowing through their veins. Their bioluminescence intensified to blinding levels, momentarily incapacitating the remaining Vexcar elites. With a shared breath, Ralph and Zira placed their hands on the core. The sensation was indescribable. A rush of information, emotions, and alien thoughts threatened to overwhelm them. They could feel the collective consciousness of the Vexcar, a vast network of minds spanning the galaxy. And at the center of it all, the dominating presence of High Commander Vex Lorth, his will driving the Vexcar's relentless expansion. Ralph and Zira pushed back against this alien intelligence, their hybrid nature allowing them to interface with the system in ways the Vexcar had never anticipated. They introduced themselves as a disruptive element, their very existence a contradiction that the Vexcar collective struggled to comprehend. The ship lurched again as another explosion rocked its structure. Through their connection to the core, Ralph and Zira could sense the imminent danger. The quantum jump systems were powering up, preparing to tear a hole in space-time and propel the ship to safety. They redoubled their efforts, pushing their hybrid physiologies to the limit. Their consciousness began to fragment, spreading through the Vexcar network like a virus. They could feel their individual identities slipping away, merging with the alien collective. In that moment of crisis, as the fate of Earth and the galaxy hung in the balance, Ralph and Zira clung to their shared bond. It was their anchor in the storm of alien thoughts and sensations, the one thing that kept them from losing themselves entirely. The chamber filled with a cacophony of alarms and the screech of tearing metal as the ship began to break apart around them. The core pulsed with increasing intensity, the quantum jump sequence nearing its climax. Ralph and Zira stood locked in their mental and physical struggle against High Commander Vex Lorth and the core itself, their hybrid consciousness, now inextricably linked with the Vexcar collective. As the ship teetered on the brink of destruction, the outcome of their audacious attempt remained uncertain, the future of multiple species hanging by a thread. The ship's structure groaned ominously, the sound of tearing metal echoing through the chamber as Ralph and Zira pushed their hybrid bodies to their absolute limits. Suddenly, an intense, pulsating light erupted from their semi-translucent forms. Energy patterns coursed through their veins, visible beneath their skin, which had taken on an otherworldly glow. The central core chamber filled with this radiant light, casting eerie shadows that dance across the writhing biomechanical surfaces. High Commander Vex Lortha's mental assault crashed against their consciousness like a tidal wave. Vivid, disorienting visions of Vex-Car conquest flooded their minds. Countless worlds fallen to the relentless onslaught of biomechanical armies. Entire civilizations assimilated into the hive mind. Ralph gritted his teeth, his face contorting with the effort to maintain his sense of self. "Zira," he gasped, his voice strained. We can't let them win." Zira's eyes blazed with commitment as she fought against the overwhelming alien presence. "Focus on our connection," she urged, her words barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and explosions. Outside, the battle reached its climax. Admiral Krovak's warship, coordinating with Earth's forces, unleashed a devastating barrage against the scout ship's weakening hull. The entire vessel shuddered violently as massive explosions tore through its structure. Ralph, drawing on his enhanced strength, began to physically interact with the biomechanical components of the central core. His hands, now covered in a metallic sheen, tore away critical connections. Sparks flew and alien fluid sprayed as he systematically disrupted the ship's ability to initiate a quantum jump. Zira, her mind racing at impossible speeds, worked to introduce a virus-like code into the Vex-Car collective consciousness. Her fingers danced across an invisible interface, manipulating complex algorithms that existed only in the realm of thought. Their efforts began to show results. The swarms of nanobots that had filled the chamber started to malfunction, falling to the floor in inert clumps. Several Vex-Car elites collapsed, overwhelmed by the disruption in their hive mind. High Commander Vex Lorth, his body partially merged with the ship's core, let out a sound that was part shriek, part mechanical screech. "You will not prevail, aberrations," he roared, his voice resonating through the ship systems. The commander's body began to physically fuse with the central column, becoming one with the vessel systems. Tendrils of biomechanical matter spread across the core, pulsing with malevolent energy. Ralph, seeing Vex Lortha's desperate move, launched himself towards the central column. His exoskeleton-enhanced muscles propelled him upward with incredible force. He latched onto the writhing mass of the commander's transformed body, his metallic skin providing protection against the caustic fluids that oozed from the alien form. As Ralph engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat with Vex Lorth, Zira detected a massive energy buildup within the ship systems. Her eyes widened in alarm. "Ralph!" she called out. "The ship's set to self-destruct. I'm trying to disable it." Zira redoubled her efforts, her hybrid physiology evolving further to cope with the immense strain. Her skin took on a more pronounced metallic sheen, offering additional protection against the deteriorating environment. She worked frantically to disable the detonation process, while simultaneously maintaining her attack on the Vex-Car collective consciousness. The chamber shook violently as another explosion rocked the ship. Emergency force fields flickered to life, only to fail moments later under the relentless assault from outside. The sudden decompression sent debris flying through the air, forcing Ralph to cling tighter to the central column as he struggled with Vex Lorth. Zira, still connected to the ship systems, managed to gain control of the internal defense mechanisms. She redirected the remaining functional nanobots, sending them swarming towards Vex Lorth. The tiny machines engulfed the Vex-Car commander, weakening his connection to the core. Ralph seized the opportunity, his hands finding purchase on Vex Lortha's transformed body. With a roar of effort, he began to physically tear the commander away from the ship systems. Vex Lorth thrashed wildly, his screams of rage and pain echoing through the disintegrating vessel. As the ship teetered on the brink of destruction, Ralph made a final, desperate move. He fully embraced his hybrid nature, allowing his body to partially merge with the organic components of the vessel. The sensation was indescribable, A rush of information and alien sensations threatened to overwhelm him. Zira, recognizing Ralph's strategy, synchronized her efforts with his. Together, they initiated a cascade failure in the Vexcar collective consciousness. The feedback loop created by their hybrid interference spread like wildfire through the entire Vexcar network. The effect was immediate and devastating. The remaining Vexcar forces in the chamber fell incapacitated, their connection to the hive mind severed. High Commander Vex Lorth, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief, plummeted from the central core. His body hit the chamber floor with a sickening thud, twitching feebly as his system shut down. As the hybrid pair's actions took effect, the ship's systems began to power down. The ominous hum of the self-destruct sequence faded away, leaving an eerie silence punctuated only by the distant sounds of battle outside. Ralph and Zira's relief was short-lived, however, as they realized their predicament. Their hybrid bodies, now deeply integrated with the Vexcar technology, struggled to separate from the ship systems. They found themselves trapped within the failing vessel, their physiology irrevocably changed by their ordeal. Through their neural connection, they shared a moment of silent communication. They had succeeded in neutralizing the immediate threat, potentially incapacitating the entire Vexcar invasion force across the galaxy. But at what cost? The Vexcar scout ship, now a lifeless husk, drifted aimlessly in Earth orbit. Outside, the combined forces of humanity, the Hydrogen, and the newly arrived Galactic Federation surrounded the vessel, their weapons trained on its battered hull. As Ralph and Zira struggled to free themselves from the ship's organic circuitry, they faced an uncertain future. Their bodies had been transformed beyond recognition, their minds expanded in ways they were only beginning to understand. And beyond the walls of the dying Vexcar ship, a complex political situation awaited, one that their actions had irrevocably altered. The hybrid pair exchanged a glance, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in unison. They had saved Earth, perhaps even the galaxy, but their greatest challenge lay ahead. How would they explain what had transpired here? How would they navigate the treacherous waters of interspecies politics? And most pressingly, how would they escape this failing vessel before it became their tomb? As if in answer to their unspoken questions, a new alarm blared through the ship's systems. The vessel's orbit was decaying rapidly, drawn inexorably towards Earth's atmosphere. Ralph and Zira realized with growing dread that their time was running out. They needed to find a way to free themselves and escape the doomed Vexcar ship before it was too late. As the Vexcar scout ship's orbit continued to decay, Ralph and Zira's predicament grew increasingly dire. Their hybrid bodies, still intertwined with the ship's dying systems, pulsed with an otherworldly glow as they fought to maintain their individuality against the fading echoes of the Vexcar collective consciousness. Suddenly, a new sensation washed over them, a protective field enveloping the entire vessel. Through their connection to the ship's sensors, they detected the source. Admiral Krovak's warship had established a containment field around them. They're trying to help us. Ralph managed to communicate through their shared mental link, his thoughts fragmented by the strain of resisting the ship's pull. Zira's response came as a burst of emotions rather than words, relief tinged with urgency. They both knew that while the containment field bought them time, it couldn't solve their integration problem. Outside the failing Vexcar vessel, a flurry of activity unfolded across multiple fronts. On Earth, Professor Xandor's lab hummed with frenetic energy as human and alien scientists worked tirelessly to develop an extraction method. Holographic displays flickered with streams of data from the battle, which they used to construct a model of Ralph and Zira's unique hybrid physiology. "We need to modulate the resonance frequency," Xandor muttered, his elongated fingers dancing across a control panel. "If we can match their bioelectric signature, we might be able to disrupt their connection to the Vexcar systems without causing further harm." Meanwhile, aboard the Hydrogen flagship, Dean Voxloren coordinated with military leaders from Earth and the Galactic Federation. His gravelly voice carried the weight of urgency as he addressed the assembled team. "Time is of the essence," Vox Lauren growled. "We have a narrow window to extract Ralph and Zira before the Vexcar ship's degradation reaches a critical point." Captain Arya Martinez, a seasoned veteran of Earth's Special Forces, stepped forward. "My team is ready. Sir, we've trained for extreme conditions, but this is unprecedented." Vox Lauren nodded grimly. "You'll be joined by hydrogen hunters and Federation engineers. Each brings unique skills crucial to this operation's success." As the rescue team made final preparations, the Vexcar ship shuddered violently. Inside the core chamber, Ralph and Zira felt the reverberations of internal explosions tearing through the vessel. "The ship," Zira gasped, her bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically. "It's trying to purge us." Ralph strained against the biomechanical tendrils that held them in place. "We have to resist. Help is coming." The rescue team's transport craft approached the Vexcar ship, navigating through a field of debris. Captain Martinez's voice crackled over the comm system. "All units, prepare for breach. Remember, our primary objective is extraction. Neutralize threats only if absolutely necessary." With precision born from rigorous training, the team cut through the ship's hull, creating an entry point. They moved swiftly through the corridors, their path illuminated by the eerie glow of malfunctioning Vexcar technology. "Life signs detected ahead," reported a hydrogen hunter, his enhanced senses picking up faint energy signatures. "Two entities, unlike anything I've encountered before." As they neared the core chamber, the ship's organic components sprang to life. Walls pulsed and writhed, threatening to seal off their advance. The Federation engineers deployed cutting-edge disruptors, carving a path through the regenerating tissue. Inside the chamber, Ralph and Zira sensed the approaching rescue team. With monumental effort, they managed to exert control over a small portion of the ship's systems. "We're creating a path," Ralph projected weakly to Zira. "It's all we can do to help. Their combine will force back the encroaching organic matter, leaving a clear route to the core." However, the exertion took its toll, causing visible distress in their hybrid forms. Captain Martinez and her team burst into the chamber, weapons raised. The sight that greeted them was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. Ralph and Zira suspended in a web of pulsating tendrils, their bodies radiating otherworldly energy. "Deploy the extraction device," Martinez ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. A Federation engineer activated the device developed by Professor Zandor. A shimmering energy field expanded from it, enveloping Ralph and Zira. The hybrid pair felt an immediate change, a loosening of the Vexcar ship's hold on them. As the extraction process began, Ralph and Zira's appearance started to shift. The metallic sheen of their skin faded, replaced by a subtle iridescence. Their bioluminescent patterns, once erratic, settled into a steady, pulsing rhythm. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. Dormant systems surged back to life, freed from Ralph and Zira's influence. The first wave of reactivated Vexcar drones converged on the chamber. "We've got incoming," shouted a team member, opening fire on the approaching threats. Captain Martinez made a split-second decision. Fall back to the extraction point. Defensive formation around the targets. The rescue team moved with practiced efficiency, forming a protective circle around Ralph and Zira as they retreated through the ship's corridors. The awakening Vexcar forces pressed in from all sides, their attacks growing more coordinated with each passing moment. As they neared their transport vessel, a violent tremor shook the entire ship. Professor Zandor's voice crackled over the comm system, urgent and alarmed. "The self-destruct sequence has initiated. You have less than 2 minutes to clear the blast radius." The team redoubled their efforts, practically carrying the weakened forms of Ralph and Zira as they made a final sprint for safety. They burst out of the breach in the hull, piling into the transport craft mere seconds before the Vex-Car ship erupted in a massive explosion. The force of the blast sent their small vessel tumbling, but the pilot managed to stabilize their course. As they sped away from the expanding field of debris, Admiral Krovak's warship loomed before them, its docking bay open in welcome. Aboard the hydrogen vessel, medical teams swarmed the rescue craft as soon as it touched down. Ralph and Zira, now unconscious, were quickly transferred to the ship's advanced medical bay. Their vital signs fluctuated wildly, a mix of human, hydrogen, and Vex-Car readings that baffled even the most experienced xenobiologists. As emergency procedures were initiated to stabilize the hybrid pair, the combined fleet began to stand down from high alert. The immediate threat had passed, but the debris field left behind by the Vex-Car ship's destruction presented new challenges and opportunities. In the medical bay, sophisticated scanners hummed as they analyzed Ralph and Zira's transformed physiology. The medical staff worked tirelessly, adjusting treatments on the fly to account for their unique hybrid nature. Hours passed before Ralph and Zira showed signs of regaining consciousness. As if drawn by an unseen force, their hands reached out, fingers intertwining. Their eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that swirled with bioluminescent patterns, a visible reminder of their incredible ordeal and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Ahead, their eyes locked, conveying a mix of relief, exhaustion, and uncertainty about their future. As the medical team worked to stabilize their condition, Admiral Krovak's warship set course for Earth. The journey back was tense, with the ship's advanced medical base serving as a hub of frantic activity. Xenobiologists and medical experts from various species huddled around Ralph and Zira, monitoring their vital signs and discussing treatment options in hushed tones. Upon reaching Earth's orbit, a secure transport shuttle was quickly dispatched to bring Ralph and Zira to a specialized medical facility on the surface. The facility, a joint operation between human and alien medical experts, had been hastily prepared to receive the unique hybrid patients. As they were transferred from the shuttle to the facility, Ralph and Zira caught glimpses of their surroundings through half-lidded eyes. The building was a sleek, futuristic structure, its design clearly influenced by both human and alien architecture. Armed guards from various species patrolled the perimeter, a testament to the high-security nature of their situation. Inside, Professor Zandor was already waiting, his elongated fingers tapping nervously against a datapad. As Ralph and Zira were wheeled past on hovering gurneys, the professor fell into step alongside them, his eyes wide with a mixture of concern and scientific curiosity. "How are they?" he asked one of the attending physicians, a hydrogen with cybernetic enhancements gleaming at his temples. The hydrogen doctor shook his head slightly. "Stable, but their physiology is unprecedented. We're having to rewrite our understanding of xenobiology with every passing moment." Zandor nodded, his gaze fixed on Ralph and Zira's shimmering skin. "Fascinating. Their epidermal layer seems to be undergoing continuous micro-alterations. I've never seen anything like it." As they were settled into a specially designed observation room, Ralph and Zira's hands remained intertwined. The medical staff worked around this, recognizing the importance of maintaining the physical connection between the hybrid pair. Over the next few days, Ralph and Zira drifted in and out of consciousness. During their lucid moments, they became aware of the constant hum of medical equipment and the hushed discussions of the medical team. Their skin had taken on a subtle, iridescent quality, reminiscent of the bioluminescent patterns they had displayed on the Vex-Car ship. On the fourth day, as the morning sun streamed through the facility's smart-tinted windows, Ralph's eyes fluttered open. He found Zira already awake, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that spoke volumes. "Zira," he whispered, his voice hoarse from disuse. "Are we—" Before he could finish his question, A flood of images and sensations washed over him. He saw flashes of the medical facility through Zira's eyes, felt her confusion and wonder at their new situation. It took him a moment to realize that these weren't his own thoughts or memories. Zira's eyes widened in surprise. "Ralph, did you?" "I think I just read your mind," Ralph said, a mix of awe and trepidation in his voice. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Professor Zandor, who burst into the room with impossibly strong excitement. "Ah, you're both awake. Excellent. We have so much to discuss." Over the next few hours, Zandor and his team ran a battery of tests on Ralph and Zira. They discovered that the pair could communicate telepathically over short distances, an ability that left the researchers buzzing with theories and speculations. As Ralph and Zira underwent a series of carefully monitored exercises to test their new abilities, they became aware of another startling development. When concentrating, they could manipulate small electronic devices with their bioluminescent emissions. "Remarkable," Zandor muttered, watching as Ralph caused a nearby datapad to power on and off with a mere gesture. "The implications of this are, well, they're staggering." Outside the facility, news of Ralph and Zira's condition had begun to spread, despite efforts to maintain secrecy. Dean Voxloren found himself in a whirlwind of meetings and video conferences, working tirelessly to manage the political fallout from the Vexcar incident. In a secure conference room at the United Earth Government headquarters, Voxloren addressed a group of high-ranking officials from various nations and alien delegations. The holographic displays around the room flickered with images of the destroyed Vexcar ship and the resulting debris field in Earth's orbit. "The situation is delicate," Voxloren growled, his voice carrying the weight of countless hours of negotiations. "The debris field contains advanced technology that could significantly impact the balance of power in this sector. We must proceed with caution." Admiral Krovac, representing the Hydrogen, leaned forward in his seat. "The Hydrogen High Council believes we have a right to salvage operations. Our ships were instrumental in Earth's defense." A murmur of disagreement rippled through the human contingent. Captain Aria Martinez, now serving as a liaison between Earth's military and the alien allies, spoke up. "With all due respect, Admiral, Earth was the primary target. We have a vested interest in securing and studying this technology ourselves." As the debate intensified, a message flashed across Voxloren's personal communicator. It was from Professor Zandor, requesting an urgent meeting regarding Ralph and Zira's condition. The dean excused himself, leaving the politicians and military leaders to continue their heated discussion. Back at the medical facility, Ralph and Zira were beginning to adjust to their new reality. Under the watchful eyes of the medical staff, they explored the extent of their enhanced strength and agility. During a carefully monitored physical assessment, Ralph found he could lift weights that would have been impossible for him before, while Zira demonstrated reflexes that surpassed even Hydrogen norms. However, their newfound abilities came with challenges. During a sensory perception test, Ralph suddenly clutched his head, overwhelmed by the influx of information from his heightened senses. Zira immediately rushed to his side, instinctively using their telepathic link to help him focus and regain control. As they recovered from the incident, Ralph and Zira found themselves alone for a moment. They sat side by side on the edge of Ralph's bed, their shoulders touching. "This is all so overwhelming," Ralph said softly, looking down at his shimmering hands. Zira nodded, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing gently. "I know, but at least we're in this together." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them. The bond they had formed through their shared ordeal deepened, tinged with a new, unspoken emotion. Before they could explore this further, Professor Zandor entered the room, followed by Dean Voxloren. The dean's expression was grave as he addressed the hybrid pair. "Ralph, Zira, we need to discuss your situation," Voxloren began. The world knows about you now, and not everyone is pleased with the implications of your transformation. As if on cue, a commotion could be heard outside the facility. Through the window, they could see a group of protesters gathering, their signs bearing slogans denouncing alien corruption and demanding human purity. Ralph and Zira exchanged a worried glance, their bioluminescent patterns flickering in unison. They realized that their journey was just the beginning, and the challenges they faced extended far beyond the walls of this facility. As the noise from the protests grew louder, they braced themselves for the difficult path that lay ahead, knowing that their unique bond would be tested in ways they had never imagined. As the days passed, Ralph and Zira's condition stabilized, allowing them to be moved from the medical facility to a more comfortable living space on the university campus. The transition was not without its challenges. As protesters continued to gather outside the gates, their chants a constant reminder of the controversy surrounding the hybrid pair. Despite the tension, life at the university slowly began to take on a new rhythm. Ralph and Zira found themselves at the center of an unprecedented research project, their every move studied and analyzed by a team of experts led by Professor Zandor. It was during one of these routine examinations that Dr. Ilera Voss, a renowned xenobiologist from the Galactic Federation, first laid eyes on Ralph and Zira. Her arrival on campus had been met with a flurry of excitement among the scientific community. "Fascinating," Dr. Voss murmured, her multifaceted eyes scanning the data scrolling across her holographic display. "The integration of Vexcar DNA into their cellular structure is unlike anything I've ever seen." Professor Zandor nodded enthusiastically. "Indeed, Dr. Voss, we've only scratched the surface of understanding their capabilities." Ralph and Zira exchanged glances, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in sync. They had grown accustomed to being the subject of scientific curiosity, but Dr. Voss's presence brought a new level of intensity to their examinations. Over the next few weeks, Dr. Voss set up a specialized laboratory on campus, equipped with cutting-edge technology designed to push the limits of Ralph and Zira's hybrid physiology. The pair found themselves subjected to a battery of tests, each more demanding than the last. In a sealed chamber designed to simulate extreme environments, Ralph gritted his teeth as the temperature plummeted. Frost formed on the observation window, obscuring the anxious faces of the research team. To everyone's amazement, his body adapted, his skin taking on a bluish tinge as he withstood temperatures that would have been fatal to an ordinary human. Beside him, Zira endured crushing pressures that would have reduced a normal hydrogen to pulp. Her body seemed to ripple and shift, distributing the force evenly across her frame. When the test ended, she emerged unscathed, her bioluminescent patterns dancing with excitement. "Remarkable," Dr. Voss breathed, her fingers flying across her datapad. "Their adaptability far exceeds our initial projections." As the research progressed, Ralph and Zira's bond deepened. They found solace in each other's company, their shared experiences creating a connection that transcended their physical transformations. Their ability to communicate through their bioluminescent patterns grew stronger, allowing them to exchange complex ideas without uttering a word. One night, as they sat in their shared living quarters, Ralph jolted awake from a vivid dream. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he tried to make sense of the alien landscapes that had flashed through his mind. "Zira," he whispered, shaking her gently, "I saw something strange." Zira's eyes fluttered open, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with concern. "I saw it too," she replied, her voice tinged with awe and fear. "Those structures, they look like Vexcar outposts." The next morning, they reported their shared dream to Dr. Voss and Professor Zandor. The scientists listened intently, their expressions growing more serious with each detail the hybrid pair revealed. "This could be groundbreaking," Dr. Voss mused, her mind already racing with possibilities. if you're somehow tapping into a Vexcar network. Before she could finish her thought, alarms blared across the campus. Outside, the protest had escalated. A group calling themselves the Purity Front, led by the charismatic Victor Kane, had attempted to breach the university's security perimeter. Captain Aria Martinez's voice crackled over the intercom. All non-essential personnel, please evacuate to designated safe zones. Security teams, report to your stations immediately. Ralph and Zero watched from their window as riot control measures were deployed. The scene below was chaos, with protesters clashing against the university's security forces. The air filled with shouts and the acrid smell of smoke grenades. This can't go on, Ralph said, his fists clenching at his sides. We need to do something. Zira placed a hand on his arm, her touch sending a wave of calm through their telepathic link. We will, she assured him, but we need to be smart about it. As if in answer to their concerns, Ambassador Lexon appeared on the holographic news feed. The Arcturian diplomat's expression was grave as he announced a public forum to address the growing tensions surrounding human-alien relations. We cannot allow fear and ignorance to dictate our future, Lexon declared. It is time for open dialogue and understanding. The announcement of the forum sent ripples through the campus and beyond. For Ralph and Zira, it represented a chance to show the world the true potential of human-alien cooperation. As they prepared for their role in the upcoming event, they couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility on their shoulders. In the days leading up to the forum, Ralph and Zira intensified their training, pushing the limits of their hybrid abilities under Dr. Voss's watchful eye. They knew that their performance could sway public opinion and potentially change the course of Earth's integration into the galactic community. The morning of the forum dawned clear and bright. As Ralph and Zira made their way to the event venue, they could feel the eyes of the world upon them. The air crackled with tension and anticipation, but beneath it all, there was a glimmer of hope. Hope for understanding, for progress, and for a future where humans and aliens could coexist in harmony. Harmony. As Ralph and Zira stepped onto the stage, the audience fell silent, their eyes fixed on the hybrid pair. Ambassador Lexoness's voice rang out, introducing Ralph and Zira to the gathered crowd. These two individuals represent a new chapter in our shared history, he began, but his words were soon drowned out by a commotion at the back of the auditorium. Victor Kane, leader of the Purity Front, had managed to infiltrate the forum. His face contorted with rage as he pointed an accusatory finger at Ralph and Zira. This is an abomination. We cannot allow these things to represent humanity. Before security could intervene, Ralph stepped forward, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with a calming blue light. We understand your fear, he said, his voice steady and clear. But we are not your enemy. We are the bridge between two worlds, and we have information that could save both. Zira joined him, her patterns synchronizing with Ralph's. We've discovered something crucial about the Vexcar threat, she added, her words silencing the murmurs that had begun to ripple through the crowd. In the days that followed, Ralph and Zira's revelation about their shared visions of Vexcar outposts sent shockwaves through the scientific and military communities. The decision was made swiftly. A mission would be launched to investigate these outposts, with Ralph and Zira at its core. Within weeks, the research vessel, Stellar Horizon, was prepped for departure. As Ralph and Zira boarded the ship, they cast a final glance at Earth, the blue marble shrinking in the viewport as they ascended into orbit. Captain Jared Hawkins greeted them on the bridge, his weathered face a mask of tenacity. Welcome aboard, he said, extending a hand. We've got a long journey ahead of us. As the Stellar Horizon engaged its advanced propulsion system, Ralph felt a momentary disorientation. Zira steadied him, their bioluminescent patterns flickering in shared discomfort. Dr. Alara Voss approached, her multifaceted eyes gleaming with curiosity. How are you feeling? She asked, already activating her medical scanner. Ralph took a deep breath. It's intense. Like every cell in my body is being stretched and compressed at the same time. Zira nodded in agreement. The sensations are overwhelming, but manageable. Dr. Voss made a note on her datapad. Fascinating. Your hybrid physiology seems to be adapting to the stresses of interstellar travel more rapidly than we anticipated. We'll need to run daily examinations to monitor these changes. As the days passed, Ralph and Zira settled into a routine of medical checkups and training sessions. They spent hours in the ship's holographic simulation chamber, honing their abilities under the watchful eye of Lieutenant Kira Burns, the mission's Special Forces officer. One morning, as they approached the coordinates of the suspected Vexcar outpost, Ralph awoke with a start. His bioluminescent patterns were pulsing erratically, casting an eerie glow throughout his quarters. Zira burst in moments later, her own patterns matching his intensity. "You felt it too?" Ralph asked, already knowing the answer. Zira nodded, her eyes wide. "We're close. Very close." They rushed to the bridge, where Captain Hawkins was already issuing orders. "Stealth systems engage," he announced as Ralph and Zira entered. "We're approaching the target system now." The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a massive gas giant surrounded by a network of moons. But it was the artificial structure orbiting the planet that drew everyone's attention. The Vexcar outpost hung in space, dark and seemingly lifeless. Admiral Krovac, who had been silently observing from a corner of the bridge, stepped forward. "We need to investigate that structure," he growled, his hydrogen instincts clearly itching for action. Captain Hawkins nodded. "Agreed. We'll send in a reconnaissance team. Any volunteers?" Ralph and Zira exchanged a glance, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in unison. "We'll go," Ralph said, his voice firm. As the reconnaissance team prepared for their mission, Dr. Voss outfitted Ralph and Zira with specialized EVA suits and neural interface devices. "These will record everything you experience," she explained, adjusting the fit of Ralph's helmet. "It's crucial we gather as much data as possible." Lieutenant Burns led the team to the shuttle bay, her expression stern as she briefed them on the mission parameters. "We go in, we gather intel, we get out," she said, her eyes lingering on Ralph and Zira. "No heroics, understood?" As the shuttle detached from the stellar horizon and approached the Vexcar outpost, Ralph felt a strange tingling sensation at the base of his skull. Beside him, Zira shivered, her bioluminescent patterns flickering rapidly. "Something's happening," she whispered, her voice tense. The moment they set foot inside the outpost, the walls came to life. Bioluminescent patterns, eerily similar to their own, rippled across the alien surfaces. Ralph and Zira moved as if in a trance, their hybrid abilities allowing them to interface with the dormant Vexcar systems. Lieutenant Burns watched in awe as holographic displays sprang to life around them, filling the air with streams of alien data. "What are you seeing?" she asked, her voice hushed. Ralph's eyes darted back and forth, taking in the flood of information. "It's a network," he said, his voice distant. "Outposts like this one, spread across the galaxy. And something else, a central hub." As they delved deeper into the outpost, they encountered a chamber filled with biopods. The sight sent a chill down Ralph's spine. Inside each pod, a Vexcar warrior was suspended in various stages of development. Suddenly, their presence triggered something. The pods began to pulse with energy, the Vexcar inside stirring. "We need to leave now," Lieutenant Burns shouted, already backing towards the exit. As they rushed back to the shuttle, automated drones activated, pursuing the team with single-minded drive. Ralph and Zira fell back, using their enhanced strength and agility to hold off the mechanical attackers. "Go!" Ralph yelled to the rest of the team. "We'll cover you." As the last team member boarded the shuttle, Ralph and Zira stood side by side, their bodies humming with energy. In a moment of shared instinct, they reached out, their bioluminescent patterns merging into a blinding flash. A wave of electromagnetic energy pulsed outward, short-circuiting the pursuing drones. Breathless, they stumbled into the shuttle, the doors sealing behind them as they lifted off from the outpost. As they docked with the stellar horizon, the gravity of their discovery began to sink in. Captain Hawkins and Admiral Krovac listened intently as the team reported their findings. The data they had retrieved painted a grim picture of the Vex-Car threat, but also offered hope in the form of potential weaknesses and countermeasures. As Dr. Voss began analyzing the genetic samples they had secured, Ralph and Zira retreated to their quarters. The mission had deepened their bond, their shared experiences forging a connection that went beyond the physical. Sitting side by side, their bioluminescent patterns gently pulsing in sync, they closed their eyes and focused. The visions came more clearly now. Glimpses of other outposts, flashes of alien technology, and at the center of it all, a massive structure that could only be the Vex-Scar's central hub. As the stellar horizon set course for Earth, Ralph and Zira knew that their journey was nowhere near the end. The information they carried could change the course of the coming conflict, but the true test of their abilities and their bond was yet to come. In the ship's meditation chamber, designed to amplify their connection to the Vex-Car network, Ralph and Zira prepared to delve deeper into the alien consciousness. As they synchronized their breathing, their bioluminescent patterns merged, creating intricate designs that danced across their skin. The boundaries between their minds began to blur, and together, they reached out across the vast distances of space, seeking the key to humanity's survival in the hidden depths of the Vex-Car network. Consciousness. As their shared vision faded, Ralph and Zira opened their eyes to find themselves still in the meditation chamber, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in perfect synchronization. Suddenly, the ship lurched and the lights flickered. Alarms blared throughout the stellar horizon as the non-essential systems began to shut down. "What's happening?" Ralph asked, his voice infused with concern. Zira's eyes widened as she realized the implications. I think we did this." Captain Hawkins' voice crackled over the intercom, tension evident in his tone. "All hands, report to emergency stations. We've experienced an unexpected electromagnetic pulse." As Ralph and Zira rushed to the bridge, they found the crew scrambling to restore power to the affected systems. Captain Hawkins turned to them, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. "I'm ordering an immediate cessation of your meditation experiments," he said firmly. "We can't risk another incident like this, especially as we approach Earth." The hybrid pair nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. As the stellar horizon neared its home planet, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for docking at the newly constructed Orbital Research Station Alpha. The massive structure loomed before them, a testament to the collaboration between Earth's governments and the Galactic Federation. As the ship maneuvered into position, Ralph and Zira gazed out at the station, marveling at its sleek design and advanced technology. The docking procedure completed with a gentle thud, and the airlocks hissed open. Ralph and Zira, along with the rest of the mission team, filed out into the station's pristine corridors. They were greeted by a delegation led by familiar faces, Dean Voxloren and Ambassador Lexon. "Welcome back," Dean Voxloren said, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with excitement. "We've been eagerly awaiting your return." Ambassador Lexon stepped forward, his expression grave. "The data you brought back could change everything. We must act quickly." The group made their way to the high-security laboratory, where Dr. Alara Voss immediately began collaborating with a team of human and alien scientists. The Vex-Car samples were carefully transferred to containment units, and the analysis began in earnest. Meanwhile, Ralph and Zira found themselves subjected to a battery of medical examinations. Dr. Voss, splitting her time between the genetic research and the hybrid pair's checkups, furrowed her brow as she reviewed the results. Your DNA has undergone further mutations, she explained, pointing to a holographic display of their genetic structure. It appears to have incorporated elements of Vexcar genetic material. Ralph felt a chill run down his spine. Is that dangerous? Dr. Voss shook her head. We're not sure yet. We'll need to monitor you closely to determine any long-term effects. As the days passed, the station buzzed with activity. Admiral Krovac, recognizing the strategic importance of Ralph and Zira's unique abilities, proposed the creation of a specialized task force. Captain Aria Martinez, a decorated veteran of Earth's Space Fleet, was assigned to lead the team. Your mission, Admiral Krovac growled during the briefing, will be to identify and neutralize Vexcar outposts throughout the galaxy. Ralph and Zira will be key operatives in this endeavor. The training sessions were intense, pushing the limits of both human and hybrid physiology. Ralph and Zira found themselves excelling in ways they never thought possible, their enhanced strength and agility giving them an edge in various combat scenarios. One evening, as they were finishing a particularly grueling simulation, alarms blared throughout the station. Lieutenant Kira Burns' voice came over the intercom, her tone urgent. Security breach in the lower levels. All personnel, prepare for potential hostile engagement. Ralph and Zira exchanged a glance, their bioluminescent patterns flashing in shared understanding. Their minds were immediately assaulted by a cacophony of alien thoughts and images. It's the Vexcar collective consciousness. Zira gasped, her body trembling with the effort of resistance. Ralph gritted his teeth, fighting against the invasion of his mind. We have to break free. As they struggled against the mental onslaught, their physical bodies began to show signs of strain. Sweat beaded on their foreheads, and their muscles tensed and quivered. Back on the Shadow Striker, Dr. Alara Voss monitored their vital signs with growing concern. Captain, she called out, her voice tense. Ralph and Zira's physiological readings are off the charts. The strain on their systems is reaching critical levels. Captain Martinez's face hardened as she made a quick decision. Prepare for emergency extraction. We're not losing them to this alien hive mind. Inside the hub, Ralph and Zira fought desperately against the Vexcar collective consciousness. Their minds were bombarded with images of distant worlds, advanced technologies, and the relentless expansion of the Vexcar Empire. As they battled, something unexpected began to happen. The bioagent developed by Dr. Voss, still present in their systems, started to interact with the Vexcar technology surrounding them. The chamber walls pulsated erratically, and a high-pitched whine filled the air. What's happening? Ralph shouted over the noise, his hands pressed against his temples. Zira's eyes widened as she felt a surge of power coursing through her body. The bioagent. It's reacting to the hub. The control node at the center of the chamber emitted a blinding flash of light, forcing the team to don protective gear. The entire structure shuddered, and alarms blared throughout the complex. With a final burst of mental energy, Ralph and Zira broke free from the Vexcar's psychic grip. The sudden disconnection triggered a failsafe within the alien network, and a mechanical voice announced the initiation of a self-destruct sequence. Captain Martinez's voice cut through the chaos. Everyone out now. The hub is going to blow. Ralph and Zira stumbled, weakened from their mental battle. Two team members rushed to support them as they began their frantic escape through the collapsing structure. Debris rained down from the ceiling, and malfunctioning defense systems sparked and sputtered around them. Despite their exhaustion, Ralph and Zira's enhanced strength proved invaluable. They cleared paths through blocked corridors, allowing the team to progress towards the extraction point. As they approached the airlock where the Shadow Striker was docked, a group of awakened Vexcar warriors emerged from a side passage, their biomechanical armor gleaming in the pulsating emergency lights. "Hostiles!" shouted one of the team members, raising his weapon. Ralph and Zira exchanged a quick glance, their bioluminescent patterns flashing in silent communication. Without a word, they sprang into action. Zira ducked under a Vexcar energy blast, rolling forward to sweep the legs out from under the nearest warrior. Ralph followed up with a powerful strike, his enhanced strength sending the alien crashing into the wall. The rest of the team provided covering fire as Ralph and Zira worked in perfect tandem, their hybrid abilities giving them a crucial edge in the close-quarters battle. They moved with inhuman speed and agility, disarming and disabling the Vexcar warriors with precision strikes. As the last alien fell, Captain Martinez called out, "Move! We're almost there." The team rushed through the airlock and into the Shadow Striker. The ship's engines roared to life as they disengaged from the hub. Through the view screen, they watched as a massive Vexcar structure began to implode. The collapse sent shockwaves through the surrounding asteroid field, creating a deadly maze of debris. Captain Martinez's hands flew over the controls, her face a mask of concentration. "Hold on tight. This is going to be a rough ride." As the ship weaved through the chaos, Ralph and Zira found themselves still connected to the remnants of Vexcar technology. Their senses, heightened beyond normal human limits, allowed them to perceive the trajectories of the surrounding debris with uncanny accuracy. "Captain," Ralph called out, his voice strained. "Bank left." "Now!" Martinez followed his instruction without hesitation, narrowly avoiding a massive chunk of the hub as it hurtled past them. For several tense minutes, Ralph and Zira guided the ship through the treacherous field, their hybrid abilities providing a crucial edge in their escape. Finally, they emerged from the debris field, the vast expanse of space opening up before them. As the immediate danger passed, Dr. Voss rushed to attend to Ralph and Zira. Their skin had taken on a permanent metallic sheen, and their bioluminescent patterns pulsed with newfound complexity. "Fascinating," Dr. Voss murmured as she began emergency treatment. "The prolonged exposure to the Vexcar neural network seems to have accelerated their hybrid evolution." As the Shadow Striker set course for Earth, Ralph and Zira slowly regained full consciousness. Their minds were a whirlwind of new information, critical intelligence about Vexcar outposts, invasion plans, and advanced technologies. Captain Martinez leaned in, her expression a mix of concern and urgency. "What did you see in there?" Ralph and Zira exchanged a look, their enhanced connection allowing them to silently organize their thoughts. Then, they began to share the wealth of information they had extracted from the Vexcar hub, knowledge that would prove invaluable in the fight against the alien threat. As they spoke, the Shadow Striker sped towards Earth, carrying with it the key to potentially turning the tide in humanity's most desperate hour. But for Ralph and Zira, this victory came with a price, their bodies and minds forever altered by their encounter with the ancient alien consciousness. The true extent of these changes, and what they would mean for their future, remained to be seen. Remained to be discovered. As the Shadow Striker approached Earth, Ralph and Zira were immediately thrust into a whirlwind of activity. The intelligence they had gathered from the Vexcar hub was vital to humanity's defense, and there was no time to waste. Within days of their return, they found themselves at the newly constructed interspecies cooperation arena on the outskirts of New Geneva. The massive structure loomed before them, its architecture a blend of human and alien design principles. Ralph felt a flutter of nerves as they approached the entrance. "Ready for this?" he asked Zira, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Zira squeezed his hand, her own patterns synchronizing with his. "As ready as we'll ever be," she replied, her voice steady despite the pressure of the moment. As they entered the arena, they were immediately struck by the sheer number of spectators. Humans and aliens from various worlds filled the stands, creating a tapestry of diverse forms and colors. The air buzzed with anticipation. Captain Martinez's voice came through their earpieces. "Remember your training. You've got this." The demonstration began with a series of physical challenges. Ralph approached a specially designed weight system, its mass far beyond what any unaugmented human could handle. He took a deep breath, centered himself, and gripped the bar. With a surge of strength, he lifted the weight cleanly off the ground. The crowd gasped as he held it aloft, his muscles barely straining under the enormous load. As he set it down, a cheer erupted from the stands. Zero was next, facing a complex obstacle course that stretched across the arena floor. At the signal, she launched into motion. Her movements were a blur as she navigated twisting pathways, leaped over barriers, and ducked under swinging obstacles. She crossed the finish line in a time that seemed impossible, leaving the audience stunned. From her position in the control center, Dr. Alara Voss monitored their vital signs with growing excitement. "Incredible," she murmured, her eyes flicking between the displays. "Their physiology is continuing to adapt. They're exceeding even our most optimistic projections." The next phase of the demonstration focused on their ability to interact with alien technology. A sealed container was brought out, containing a deactivated Vexcar drone recovered from the destroyed hub. Ralph and Zira approached the container, their bioluminescent patterns intensifying. As they focused their minds, tendrils of light seemed to extend from their bodies, connecting with the dormant drone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, the drone powered up. Its lights blinked to life, and it rose smoothly into the air. Guided by Ralph and Zira's mental commands, it performed a series of intricate maneuvers, showcasing their unprecedented control over Vexcar technology. The crowd's amazement was palpable, but the demonstration was suddenly interrupted by a series of explosions from the outer sections of the arena. Smoke billowed through the corridors, and alarms began to blare. "Purity front!" shouted Captain Martinez over the comms. "They've breached the perimeter." Without hesitation, Ralph and Zira sprang into action. They moved through the chaos with preternatural speed and precision, their enhanced senses allowing them to navigate the smoke-filled corridors with ease. They encountered the first group of Purity Front infiltrators near a service entrance. The extremists, led by Victor Kane, were attempting to force their way deeper into the facility. "Stop them!" Kane shouted as he caught sight of Ralph and Zira. "Don't let those abominations near us." Ralph dodged a wild swing from one of Kane's followers, using the attacker's momentum to flip him onto his back. Zira moved in perfect sync, disarming another infiltrator with a swift series of strikes. Together, they worked their way through the Purity Front group, neutralizing the threat with minimal force. Their movements were fluid and efficient, showcasing the full extent of their hybrid abilities. As the last infiltrator fell, Ralph turned to face Victor Kane. The Purity Front leader's face was a mask of hatred and fear. "It's over, Kane," Ralph said, his voice firm. "You can't stop the future." Before Kane could respond, security forces swarmed the area, taking the Purity Front members into custody. In the aftermath of the attack, Ambassador Lexon took the stage to address the shaken but impressed crowd. Ralph and Zira stood beside him, their presence a powerful symbol of human-alien cooperation. "Today, we have witnessed not only the potential of hybridization," Lexon declared, his voice carrying across the arena, "but also the strength that comes from unity in the face of those who would divide us." As the ambassador's words rang out, Ralph and Zira exchanged a glance. They had faced their first real test as hybrids, and they had passed with flying colors. But they both knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The Vexcar threat still loomed, and the information they had gathered from the hub caused great concern on their minds. As they stood before the cheering crowd, their thoughts turned to the battles yet to come and the role they would play in humanity's fight for survival. Survival. As the crowd's applause faded, Ralph and Zira were quickly ushered away from the arena by Captain Martinez and Dr. Voss. No time to celebrate, Martinez said, her voice tense. We've just received intel on Vex-Car fleet movements near the Proxima colony. We need to move now. Within hours, Ralph and Zira found themselves aboard the Shadow Striker, preparing for their most daunting mission yet. The ship's briefing room buzzed with activity as a specialized strike team of human and alien operatives gathered around a holographic display. Captain Aria Martinez stood at the head of the table, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the tactical map. Our objective is to infiltrate the Vex-Car command vessel and disable their fleet coordination systems, she explained, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Ralph studied the holographic representation of the Vex-Car fleet, his enhanced vision picking up details invisible to others. Beside him, Zira's bioluminescent patterns pulsed in sync with the data streams flowing across the display. As the Shadow Striker approached the outskirts of the Vex-Car fleet, Ralph and Zira took up positions in the ship's sensory hub. Their hybrid physiology allowed them to interface directly with the ship's systems, guiding it through gaps in the Vex-Car sensor network. "Patrol ship at 2 o'clock, Ralph murmured, his eyes closed as he processed the incoming data. Zira responded instantly, adjusting their course with a mere thought. The tension on the bridge was palpable as they neared the massive Vex-Car command vessel. Ralph and Zira's bioluminescent patterns intensified, creating a mesmerizing light show across their skin as they worked in perfect harmony to avoid detection. With a soft hiss, the Shadow Striker docked with the Vex-Car ship's maintenance airlock. Ralph and Zira led the strike team into the alien vessel, their hybrid biology allowing them to bypass the biological security measures with ease. Inside, the air was thick with an alien musk. The walls pulsed with an organic energy that made the human members of the team visibly uncomfortable. Ralph signaled for the team to split up as planned. "Stay sharp," he said to his group as they headed towards the power core. "We don't know what kind of internal defenses we might trigger." Zira nodded to her team, leading them towards the central command center. Her enhanced senses picked up the faint vibrations of Vex-Car movement in the distance. As Ralph's team navigated the twisting corridors, they suddenly found themselves face-to-face with a patrol of Vex-Car drones. Without hesitation, Ralph sprang into action. His enhanced strength and agility allowed him to close the distance before the drones could react. Ralph's fist connected with the lead drone's cephalic processor, sending it crashing into its companions. He moved like a blur, each strike precise and devastatingly effective. His team watched in awe as he single-handedly neutralized the entire patrol in seconds. Meanwhile, Zira's group reached the command center. As her team engaged the Vex-Car operators, Zira's fingers flew over the alien console, her hybrid mind interfacing directly with the ship systems. She began uploading the virus designed to scramble the fleet's coordination protocols. In the power core, Ralph's team worked quickly to plant the EMP devices. As Ralph activated the final device, alarms blared throughout the ship. "Time to move," he barked, leading his team back towards the extraction point. The corridors erupted into chaos as Vex-Car warriors converged on their position. Ralph and Zira's teams fought their way through, their hybrid abilities proving crucial in overcoming the alien defenses. As they approached the airlock where the Shadow Striker waited, they encountered a final obstacle, a contingent of elite Vex-Car soldiers guarding their escape route. Ralph and Zira exchanged a quick glance, their bioluminescent patterns flaring in silent communication. Moving in perfect synchronization, they unleashed the full extent of their hybrid powers. Their patterns created disruptive electromagnetic fields, disorienting the Vex-Car guards. In the confusion, the strike team broke through, rushing aboard the Shadow Striker. Captain Martinez wasted no time, initiating an emergency departure as soon as the airlock sealed. Through the view screen, they watched as the Vex-Car command vessel began to implode, triggering a chain reaction among the surrounding ships. As the Shadow Striker sped away from the chaos, Ralph and Zira suddenly collapsed, overwhelmed by unexpected physiological changes. Dr. Voss rushed to their side, her medical scanner whirring as it analyzed their rapidly evolving hybrid physiology. "Captain," she called out, her voice a mix of concern and excitement. "We need to get them to the medical bay on Admiral Krovak's flagship immediately. Their genetic structure is undergoing significant alterations." As the Shadow Striker docked with the flagship, Ralph and Zira were quickly transported to the advanced medical facilities. The ship's scanners revealed astonishing changes in their hybrid DNA, indicating even greater potential for interfacing with Vexcar technology. Despite their weakened state, Ralph and Zira found themselves summoned to a high-level strategy meeting. As they entered the flagship's war room, they were met with the determined faces of Admiral Krovak and other key leaders of the Allied forces. The gravity of their role in the conflict became crystal clear as they took their seats. The fate of Earth and the entire galaxy now rested on their unique abilities and the daring plan about to unfold. Be unfurled. Admiral Krovak's imposing figure dominated the room as he activated a holographic display of the Vexcar homeworld. "Our intelligence suggests that the Vexcar are coordinating their entire empire from this central control spire," Krovak explained, his voice resonating with urgency. "Ralph, Zira, your unique abilities make you the only ones capable of infiltrating this facility." Ralph and Zira exchanged glances, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in silent communication. Despite their weakened state, they understood the gravity of the situation. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with a mix of concern and willpower. "I've developed a specialized nutrient regimen to stabilize your evolving physiology," she said, handing them each a small device. "These implants will regulate your metabolic processes during the mission." As the meeting concluded, Ralph and Zira were whisked away to a high-tech training facility aboard the flagship. Over the next few days, they underwent intensive simulations, pushing their hybrid abilities to new limits. In a virtual recreation of the Vexcar control spire, Ralph found himself surrounded by holographic enemies. He moved with fluid grace, his enhanced strength allowing him to dispatch foes with ease. Across the room, Zira's fingers danced over a simulated Vexcar console, her mind interfacing directly with the alien code. "Remarkable," Captain Martinez murmured, watching their progress. "They're adapting faster than we ever imagined." As the Allied fleet approached the Vexcar homeworld, Ralph and Zira boarded the Phantom Whisper, a sleek vessel that incorporated salvaged Vexcar technology. Captain Martinez and a small support team joined them, their faces set with steadfast perseverance. The ship slipped silently through space, its bio-signature mimicking that of a Vexcar scout vessel. As they neared the planet's outer defenses, Ralph and Zira focused their hybrid abilities, emitting false identification signals that fooled the Vexcar security net. "We're through," Martinez announced, her voice tight with tension. "Prepare for landing." The Phantom Whisper touched down in a remote area, its hull seamlessly blending with the alien landscape. As the team disembarked, Ralph's enhanced senses immediately picked up the strange scents and sounds of the Vexcar world. Zira's bioluminescent patterns shifted, adapting to match the surrounding environment. "This way," she whispered, guiding the team towards a hidden path that led in the direction of the central control spire. In that quiet moment, they stood not just as colleagues or friends, but as pioneers on the brink of a new frontier, one that promised to reshape the very fabric of galactic society. The future stretched out before them, filled with possibilities as vast and varied as the stars themselves. And as they stood there, hand in hand, Ralph and Zira knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as partners, as hybrids, and as the architects of a new era of interstellar cooperation.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.